If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Has anyone ever encountered a strange humanoid creature? A tall, skinny, or faceless otherworldly being, or creepy gray aliens, that you still have nightmares about?
Conroe, Texas. Flying humanoid. It was July of 2021 when we were taking our umpteenth girls' trip to Galveston. There were 2 people sitting in the front and 2 in the back seats of a Hummer. We were talking and listening to music when I noticed something flying toward us alongside Highway 45, far in the distance. As we traveled, we were all trying to determine exactly what it was we were seeing. It was draped in black and literally seemed to be a faceless upright human, flying in a straight line, yet without arms or any sort of propulsion. We estimated we were able to watch it for about 2 miles as the gap closed between us. It was fairly high, but we all saw that it appeared to be wearing a flowing type of fabric. This thing was the subject of discussion for days afterward. To this day, we still wonder what we saw and agree there was no way it behaved like a kite or a jet pack. Plus, the area is mostly ranch lands. Has anyone else seen something like this? I saw an unexplained, headless thing. So this event takes place in California in my old house in Pacoma around 2007 or 2008. When I was 3 or 4, I remember I was in our living room pretending to play football with my little Peter Piper's foam football while my older brother was in the bedroom playing NFL Street. I don't know why, but I look to my left outside, and all of a sudden I see this thing outside the kitchen window. The best I can describe it is that it was wearing a brown suit and tie, but it was headless, no relation to Slender Man, and then after that the power went out and it disappeared. I always forget what happened afterwards, but I can remember everything else so clearly. Need help figuring out what we saw in the woods. Nearly 20 years ago, my best friend and I were walking during the day on an overgrown path in the woods that connects the new cemetery to the old cemetery in our town. About 1.5 meters off the path we saw this tall, maybe 6 feet, humanoid figure that was light beige with 0 distinctive features, no face, no hair, no body definition, and it was moving toward us onto the path. Neither of us said a thing. In a split second we looked at each other and bolted back in the direction we came from, back to the car. In a recent conversation, she mentioned that she primarily recalls the figure as having a large torso without nipples and loose skin folds. It happened in a small town in Saratoga County in upstate New York. I've lived there my whole life, and it's relatively uneventful and pretty safe. I am familiar with the wild animals, and the town has no cryptid lore or local legends, though I guess we do have some pretty rich Revolutionary War and Native American history nearby. We've no idea what we've seen and have never found answers, but we mutually agree on the details, and if she didn't run with me, I'd think I was crazy. I'm hoping someone here might have some insights. I encountered something gray, glowing, and tall in my home when I was a kid. For some backstory, this happened when I was 9 or 10 years old. My parents moved us into a brand new house. We were the first family to live in it. The house always had a dark vibe about it, like the energy was just off. If you were alone in a room, you could feel someone enter, but no one would be there. You could feel a lot of energy, you were never truly alone type of energy. If you were taking a shower, you'd see a shadow in the room with you walking around through the glass of the shower door. You could be sleeping in the bonus room and wake up to a shadow figure in the doorway. It happened to my parents and me, but of course my parents played it off as nothing. No one was ever content in that house. Now that I'm older, whenever I have a nightmare, more times than not it's about that house, or the setting is at the house. Now on to my title. I could probably think of a logical reason for any of the things I talked about above, but not this. I know this really happened. This was not my imagination. When I was young, I always slept in between my parents because I was terrified of the dark. One night I shot straight up in bed, and in the doorway this tall, skinny, glowing gray human-looking thing walked past the doorway into the bonus room. It had no hair, and it gave off male energy. Time didn't stand still. There was nothing weird happening other than the fact I just saw this thing walk past my door. It had no facial features. I was scared when I saw this because of the energy it gave off. Following this incident I would always see red glowing eyes in my bedroom closet whenever I'd pass by. I'm 26 now, and I've seen a lot of scary things, but this one always makes me feel the worst when I remember it. What do y'all think it was? Has anything like this happened to anyone? This happened in Northern California for anyone wondering. July 25th, tall gray humanoid and light in woods, Martha's Vineyard. After looking out a window that allowed full observation of the back porch, I witnessed what is classified as a gray staring right back at me. It ran. I estimated its height to be about 7 feet 5 inches since I am 6 feet 5 inches, and I heard it slip away with bare feet on the wooden deck before disappearing into the brush. I essentially had a stroke and calmly walked back downstairs. Within a short time, out back on the deck, in the dead of night, pitch black, through the trees about 55 feet from me, I saw what looked like a long, skinny, tall light that had pulsating movements resembling that of a burning cigarette ember. It had almost all the same colors as a cigarette ember: reds, amber, orange, and even a slight blue hue. I tilted my head and moved my body back and forth, but the light stayed perfectly still. It was completely silent. I saw a 4-foot-tall faceless/scarred head humanoid in a cloak. Hello everyone, I subscribed to this community recently out of curiosity, but this encounter happened many years ago. It is still a very vivid memory that has stuck with me for some time. I haven't shared this encounter with many people, but this channel seems to be the perfect place. I was 19 and had just moved into my first place, a basement suite in an older house. The landlord lived above with his wife, and they were very friendly folk. I hardly saw them apart from the husband working in the backyard once in a while. The suite was completely isolated from the house above. After a few days of settling in, I was dropping in and out of sleep one evening. I remember having terrible nightmares, possibly night terrors, but I vividly remember waking up and being alert, totally separate from the dreams. I jolted from the dream state in a panic, and as I opened my eyes and gained my bearings, I saw to my horror an approximately 4-foot-tall thing at the foot of my bed. This creature, for lack of a better name, was wearing a brown cloak, covering its entire body, except for the area where a face would be. But, instead of a face, I saw scars. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just scars. I remember to this day the terror I felt, how real this encounter felt. After a few seconds of trying to process this, I glanced away ever so slightly, and then when I returned my gaze, the being was gone. I was soaked in sweat and sat in my bed for what felt like ages, trying to process this. I called a friend and woke them up, begging for them to come over or for me to visit them. Several other strange occurrences took place in that basement suite, but this was by far the most extraordinary experience I have ever had. Thanks for letting me share this. Tall, slim woman with completely black eyes. Short story. I was walking home to my apartment on First Hill in downtown Seattle on Cherry Street, walking up the steep hill. I was approaching a woman's homeless shelter just before the top of the hill along 8th Avenue and Cherry Street. Right outside the gate to the shelter was a woman. Standing still doing nothing. Very tall woman. Probably 6 feet 4 inches. As I walk by, I look up at her, and she has completely black eyes. No white at all. I felt dreadful and cold suddenly. I quickly looked away and got to the top of the hill, maybe 15 feet more. I turn around, and she's gone. Any other types of experiences? I'm sure she was just a lady, maybe high on drugs, as that's common among the homeless here. I encountered a tall, dark, and negative entity. Hi, I've been trying to find answers to this experience for years. I wanted to share here and see what you guys think about this experience and what it could have been visiting me. About 10 years ago I was lying in bed one night sleeping, and I woke up around 3 to 3:30 a.m. I was completely wide awake and just rolled around in my bed, trying to get comfortable enough to fall back asleep. Eventually I rolled towards my doorway and lay there staring into the hall. Directly across the hall was the bathroom, and right next to it was my sister's room. As I was lying there, I saw the bathroom door handle begin to jiggle. Moments later, the bathroom door slowly creaked open. I was terrified because the bathroom door was closed and would need some sort of force to be opened. Out stepped a very tall, completely opaque black shadow figure. It turned to look in the direction of my sister's room and then slowly turned in the direction of my room. It started to slowly walk towards my room, and I was trembling. Tears started to pour down my face, without me even realizing it. Whatever this thing was, it looked disfigured, I guess? It was about 8 feet tall and had lumps along its arms. The head had some of the similar bumps and protruding objects, and also indentations. As it got closer, I pulled my covers over my face and tried to hide, I guess. All of a sudden I had a feeling he was there and lifted my covers from my eyes. This thing was standing in my doorway. It was about to take another step forward, and out of instinct my arm flew to my bedside lamp and flicked it on. As soon as the lamp came on, this creature began to fade out. Scariest experience of my life. I will never forget it, it was so vivid. And I know this isn't sleep paralysis because I moved so much during this. I could not fall asleep for nights. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can help me identify what this entity is. I appreciate it. Tall, white, slender-like creature? So I'm not sure about this, but here we go. So I was walking around my house, where I am. It's evening time, and I'm in the house by myself, so it couldn't have been like a shadow or anything, but like I said, I was walking when I saw this slender, white-like creature. It was swiftly approaching, and I saw it in the corner of my eye. It seemed to move with long steps across the floor and then disappeared through the wall almost, and it kind of creeped me out considering I've seen things like this before, but this was the first time I had a full glance at it. So yeah, the event happened about 1 hour ago. Terrifying encounter in Spike Island, Cork Harbour, Ireland. June, 1914. The witness was walking along a path located next to the sea, absorbed in her memories with her eyes mostly on the ground. She happened to look up when she was about 5 yards away from the wall of a local doctor's house and saw something bizarre. A strange figure was looking over the wall across the harbor to Cove. She walked a few more steps nearer before she realized what it was, and then she became rooted to the ground with fear. It was not 10 paces away, and she could see it only too clearly. It must have been a very tall creature that was looking over the wall, because she could almost see it to its waist, and the wall was at least 5 feet high. It was in the rough shape of a human being, that is, it had a head and shoulders and arms, though she did not see the hands, which were behind the wall. Except for 2 dark caverns, which represented the eyes, the whole thing was of one color, a sort of glistening yellow. As the wall was parallel to the road and on her left, the thing was looking past her, across the little road, and straight across to Cove. As the witness stood petrified, the thing began to turn its head very slowly toward her. At this point the young witness heard a voice in her ear, "If it looks straight at you, Eileen, you will die." Her feet seemed to be anchored to the ground by heavy weights, but somehow she managed to turn and run. She ran into a nearby cottage about 15 yards away. Her next memory was of Mrs. Riley, the owner of the cottage, sponging her face with water as she shook all over with shock and terror. She told Mrs. Riley that she had seen something dreadful in the doctor's garden. Mrs. Riley told the young witness that she was not the first to see it and would not be the last. I saw a tall pair of white legs walking in my neighbor's yard. The feeling around my house has been so creepy lately, I felt like something has been watching me for the past couple of weeks. Some weird experiences had happened before I saw whatever I saw, tapping on the side of the house I saw it on, feeling watched through the window, my dogs barking and staring at nothing, and my neighbor's shed door opening and closing for no reason. My neighbors died 3 months ago, their family owns the house now, but they haven't been to the house in over a month. The shed door isn't broken and just opens and closes randomly. I saw it walking/running by the side of their shed up towards the alley. My sister was sitting outside with me and saw it as well. All of our dogs were staring in that direction. We were petrified, not gonna lie. The vibe was so awful, it was like I just needed to get out of there right then. After the creature ran to the alley, all our dogs went to the back of the fence, which is odd since they usually bark at everything except for 2 of them, who growled. I have really weird experiences around my area. I live in Florence, Alabama. Has anyone else experienced what I did? What could it be? Faceless man. I remember a few years ago when I was maybe 25, I woke up from a nap on the couch in the daytime. In front of me was a shadow figure, humanoid. Had no face or distinct features. I'm no stranger to sleep paralysis and have had some odd dreams and stuff like that, so I chalk this event up to some waking illusion. I remember trying to blink the thing away, and after a few seconds it did disappear, but it didn't go away immediately. This encounter was very strange to me because I sat up and could see my surroundings. I was awake, but I could still see this figure. A gray shadow man, hovering in front of me. Has anyone else experienced this sort of thing before? Did I see a mimic? A childhood experience. When I was 13 or 14, I had a nightmare that woke me up. I slept on the bottom bunk bed that I shared with my brother. Feeling relieved that it was just a dream, I open my eyes a little more and see a 6-foot-tall, thin silhouette standing next to my bed. Squinting, I looked at its face, and it looked like my older brother smiling at me. I wondered what on earth he was doing in my room in the middle of the night. He slept in the room across the hall. But then I saw my brother's face morph into an androgynous stranger with long blonde hair and a menacing smile. It extended its hands, and in one of its hands I saw an axe with a half-moon blade. The figure then raised the axe above its head, both hands on the hilt, ready to strike, and it jumped toward me at probably half the speed of what you would expect. I'm getting chills as I write this. I shouted as loudly as I could while yanking my covers over my face and turning away from the figure. My scream woke up my whole family. I can't prove that it was a dream within a dream, but I feel that it happened in waking life. I also experienced strange phenomena in that room, Like an RC car turning its wheels randomly in the quiet hours of early morning, its only controller resting on my dresser, empty of batteries. Has anyone ever had a similar experience? Is it a mimic's mo to scare young kids? What other being could this have been? My 2 encounters. My bedroom 2 years ago, one night I had trouble sleeping, and something felt off. I was in my room. It was near 10 at night. I had looked over to the hallway. There was a woman who I had never seen before at the top of the steps. She was wearing a dress that had spots and had curly hair. She stared at me, just looking at me. She had a calm look on her face. She was not there for long. When she left, she just disappeared. Snorkeling. My second encounter took place last year when I went snorkeling. This was during summer break. So one day when I went to Florida with my family, we decided we would go snorkeling. While I was there, I went near the rocks. I was looking at the fish for most of the time. Near the end of the trip is when I saw the creature. I then decided I would look in the rocks. I saw a lot of fish, and then I went to look in one specific rock. I then peered in the rock. I thought I saw a small humanoid creature. It did not move. Its face did not look very human, it looked grayish. The creature had big eyes. Once I saw it, I decided to swim back to shore. I never did go back to that same area. I then told my family what I saw, and they told me that I was probably just mistaking the rocks for things. Strange humanoid creature. A few months ago, I was on my way to bed after finishing my movie. I passed the guest room and heard some creaking noises. I went to check because the floor wasn't made of wood, but I didn't see anything. So I went back to bed, only to hear that noise again. When I went to check, I saw a humanoid thing jump out of the window. I just had time to see it before it jumped out. I quickly went downstairs and found it in my chicken coop. It had fallen in, which gave me a closer look. It was very tall and skinny, with smooth skin. I have no further information, as it was a long time ago. He managed to get away and ran in a strange way, as if he was having trouble standing. Yes, it looked like something out of a horror movie. Does anyone know what was in my house that day? I sometimes see it again when I take my dog out at night. Am I crazy? Do you have any information about her? A girl witnesses a tall black creature that was wheezing while in her room. Location: Festus, Missouri. Date: March 20, 2008. Time: 11 p.m. The witness was lying in bed, which is a top bunk, but she still got a clear view of the television, her sister's dresser, and the computer desk. Her room has shelves nailed up on 3 walls of the bedroom, filled with different glass figures of dragons, wizards, and fairies. She was just lying on her bed, and she couldn't go to sleep. The room was fairly dark, so she could see the glass figures. She rolled over on her left side trying to get in a comfortable position. She lay there for a minute until she heard something wheeze for a second and then stop. The sound was far away, but yet close enough to startle her, so she rolled over on her other side and hung half her body over the railing of her bed. As far as she could see, her sister was fast asleep, so she tried to get comfortable again. After a little while, she fell asleep. She slept for half an hour, until she woke up to a noise in her room that was coming from one of the shelves. It sounded like one of the figures had been bumped slightly, but the shelves were up too high to get bumped. Puzzled, she heard a gasping sound that seemed closer than before, prompting her to lean over the railing again to check if her sister was still asleep. She was still sleeping, so she got back onto the bed and put the covers over her head. After a little while she fell asleep again. But she woke up again to the same noise as before after sleeping restlessly for 30 minutes. She heard something wheeze for about 2 seconds, but this time it was really close. She leaned over the railing again and, after a minute, looked over to the right side of her bed toward one of the shelves. She gasped and stared in awe at a 6-foot-tall black foggy figure passing right over the television and the shelf. It had 2 white spots where its eyes should have been, and it was in the shape of a man. It wasn't see-through, and what appeared to be its feet never touched the ground. As it passed near the shelf, one of the dragon figures got bumped. As the figure passed, it wheezed and walked right into the wall. After this happened, she put the covers tight over her head and fell asleep. I saw a faceless person at my workplace one day that vanished without a trace. First of all, I've never seen or heard anything that wasn't there, so I have a sound mind. I figured I'd share this here since there aren't many people in real life who'd believe me because of how strange this encounter is. For context, I was working at a restaurant when hardly anyone was there. Most of the staff at that time, skeleton crew, had gone to break, and it was just me in the back kitchen. I went to put some frozen items back in the freezer and then walked towards the tables. Out of the corner of my eye, I clearly saw a humanoid figure standing in the doorway, its head peeking around the corner. As soon as it realized I had seen it, it ducked away towards the front line and dining room area. I very quickly walked, more like ran, to the doorway, and no one was anywhere near the entire area. No one was even at the front line getting food. Even though it was for less than a second, I remember every detail about its face, or lack thereof. I know it sounds like a horror movie scene, but I promise anyone listening to the story that it just had deathly pale skin stretched over its face where eyes, a nose, or a mouth would be. After I couldn't find it, I went over to the doorway and measured the height of its head compared to the top of the pizza ovens, which was around 7 feet tall. No one anywhere near the tall worked there. At the time, I was the tallest at 6 feet. Lemur Man. This is a long shot. It was last year on Union Hills and 16th Street, where I was driving along to the freeway, and out of nowhere a lemur humanoid ran across the road. I wouldn't even say he ran, it was more like he awkwardly strode across in a fast walk, as it was pretty tall, about 5 to 6 feet tall. I looked up any sightings that could bear some resemblance to what I saw but found nothing. It looked closest to an Indri lemur. Keep in mind, I've never believed in any sort of strange phenomena prior to this. If anyone has any similar experience in the area, or at all, please corroborate with me here. This happened in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was about 12 a.m. in April of 2023. Strange encounter twice. Hey! I have found this community to share my personal experience. I was a Marine in the Kenya emoji, Army between 2011 and 2014. During my service I have visited the northern part of the country and the coastline of Somalia emoji. On my first visit to the northern part, I was on duty guarding my sleeping unit, 30-minute shifts from 11 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. until wake-up time. During this time I went to pee, and then the walkie-talkie started making strange noises. I raised my head from my private part and saw a strange figure 2-3 paces away, looking straight at me. The eyes were shiny, as in predators or night animals, and the skin looked latex-like, or like a nylon bag. I reached for my gun, but upon raising my gaze once more, it was no longer there. When I informed them on the walkie-talkie that the unit had woken up, we started a massive manhunt, which resulted in nothing but me getting mocked and beaten by my pals for this incident. I thought I was insane but have kept silent since. 2 months later, I'm on a ship on the coastline of Somalia emoji, this time placed on a tower searching for raiding pirates. I'm alone, 3 meters high, and my eyes are hawking down anything. Then I feel a strange touch on my neck, and when I turn around, that rubber man is looking at me with these damn predatory eyes. He sent his hand as he was willing to give me something. I opened my palm, terrified and stunned. His hand felt like a lubed rubber balloon surface, and he left some kind of golden necklace in my hand. I looked down at the necklace, and when I looked back up, he was gone, leaving me with my dog tag instead, which I had seen numerous times and was not golden at all. This time I kept silent, and I resigned from active service when we came back. Since then I have searched in numerous places for an answer or something that might give me a clue or a direction. This community may elaborate for me. Hopefully someone here knows something about this strange rubber man. Thanks. Something imitated the scream I made in 2024, Northern Me. To provide context, my friends and I are teenagers who enjoy going out at night in silly outfits to make videos with flashlights and play funny songs. We were out from 10:30 to 11 o'clock making these videos, and while my friend went inside to try to get better internet, I heard the exact same noise as a scream I made while making a video 20 minutes prior. It was the exact noise coming from right across the street. I looked over, saw nothing there, and booked it inside. I wasn't scared at first until my friends told me stories about them being out in the area at night and hearing screams many times in the woods. They said that skinnies can attempt to mimic the sounds of people or animals, a fact I was aware of but had not considered at the time. Many people have died in this town as well, and it is surrounded by woods. It's a very old town, and it's originally Ottawa Native American territory. Tall, caped creature. Location, Moron, Ciego de Avila, Cuba. Date, 1947. Time, 1830. 5-year-old Gladys was going out to the yard to collect the portable toilets from the outhouse to clean them. It was already getting dark. Coming out of the outhouse, she heard a strange sound, which made her look towards the north of the house, and there she saw descending from the roof of the house a bizarre figure. Once in the yard, the figure moved with extremely long strides as if walking on stilts. The figure was very tall and was wearing what appeared to be a black hooded outfit with a black cape. Terrified, she watched the figure walk towards a nearby exit from the yard. She was able to see its facial features and profile, It had a large face, with eyes, a nose, and a mouth, with a diabolic countenance. She could not see its ears since they were apparently covered by the hood. Upon arriving at the wall, it lifted its arm and took a tremendous leap, jumping over the wall and out into the street. Noticing that Gladys had taken longer than usual, her father ran out and found her in a state of shock, unable to speak and purple in color. The hunt begins for an 8 feet tall werewolf. Hull residents have reported several sightings of a half-human, half-dog beast roaming wild in the woods, reportedly around 8 feet tall. It was reportedly sighted running on 2 legs and then on all 4s around the Barmston Drain, a man-made channel near the town of Beverly. A woman, who reported seeing the enigmatic creature in December, told the Express, it was standing upright one moment. Subsequently, it shifted to running on all 4s, resembling a dog. I was terrified. It vaulted 30 feet over to the other side and vanished up the embankment and over a wall into some allotments. There were reports of 7 separate sightings of the creature. Residents have decided to organize a hunt on the next full moon to try to film and catch the beast. Local labor councillor Steve Wilson has said he is taking the sightings seriously. He told the Express, I am happy to keep a diary of sightings by people around here and report them to Hull Council. The idea of werewolves became more popular in Europe during the witch trials, when people thought witches could transform themselves into animals. The full moon being the cause of transformation only became a popular part of the werewolf myth in the 20th century. The myth of Old Stinker, the beast of Yorkshire, has fueled belief that the sightings are real. While it was known that wolves used to dig up corpses in graveyards in the Yorkshire Wolds, close to Barmston Drain, from this emerged the legend of Old Stinker, a werewolf with red eyes and foul breath who was thought to have stalked the area hundreds of years ago. Charles Christian, author of A Travel Guide to Yorkshire's Weird Wolds, told The Sun that the region is renowned for sightings of wolf-like creatures. The Yorkshire Wolds was actually one of the last parts of England to have wild wolves, he explained. Old Stinker was said to be on the other side of them, but a large animal could easily reach Hull. When you get multiple sightings combined with a tradition of stories going back centuries, it is difficult to ignore the possibility something might be there, Christian said. The Aussie claims he spotted an 8-foot-tall yowie. Australia, a man claims he recently saw an 8-foot bipedal creature in Southeast Australia. Yowie Bigfoot Australia. The Victoria resident, who provided a full name but requested to remain anonymous, told Cryptozoology News on Saturday that he was hiking in Mount Pilot on March 12 when he spotted the undetermined creature. I was looking for a photography opportunity, he said. I was walking alone, up the trail. There were trees on either side, and it was approaching dark. Further up the trail, I heard a large animal moving through the undergrowth. The 26-year-old store owner added that he suddenly saw the animal running across the trail and that it then disappeared. He described it as an 8-foot creature walking on 2 legs with long arms and a short neck. Its body, he said, was covered in shaggy brown hair. Its whole body was covered by hair. It resembled a gorilla. The sighting reportedly lasted about 10 seconds, and the man said he wasn't able to photograph the subject. The yowie, otherwise known as the Australian Bigfoot, is a monkey-like cryptid portrayed in Aboriginal mythology reputed to live in the Australian forests. Like his primate cousin, he is supposed to be curious and highly intelligent. This story happened to me not that long ago. I was hanging out with my friend, and we were bored. She has a big backyard, so we started to walk outside. I looked up and saw a tall guy walking. Mind you, it was super dark, so the only thing lighting up the street was a few street lamps. For some reason I said, "Look, it's a ghost," and we started to laugh. We were keeping an eye on him because we are 2 teen girls who don't want to get kidnapped. There was a dark area that he started walking through, so we were seeing if he was going to come into the area that had light. After a while of staring, he didn't come out the other side. So we started to walk over to that area. Once we got there, we saw him standing in front of a window. There was a house that was right there. He was looking in the window and knocking on it. He looked at us, and it looked like he was getting taller. We ran back to her house and stayed there the rest of the night. Please help, I don't know what I saw that night, and now something or someone knocks on my window every night. I'd what to do. Saw a black entity with a white face. For clarification, I saw it in El Paso, Texas, and the woman who was investigating it was somewhere in the Midwest. Allow me to explain the situation. 2 or 3 years ago, I was surfing online, and I was bored. I happened upon an account that intrigued me greatly. It was of a young woman who was investigating a tunnel that was said to be haunted. She had investigated the tunnel with her friend, discovering strange sigils throughout the area and even dreaming some up. I decided to join the mystery and assist them, but misfortune was clearly on their side. I got her social media, and she would send me pictures of the things she discovered. Various darkish anomalies in the background of the area and a photo her friend took of a ghost that had begun stalking her, the friend, ever since she started helping her. The being was completely black and abnormally tall, and his face was like a pale moon. All I knew at that point was that this could be something like an ARG. It wouldn't be long after that I encountered the same being. I was walking around in my house when it manifested out of a closet and stared at me. I felt it, so I turned around and stared back. And it floated back into the closet. I was too scared to check, so I just stood there. And I immediately backed out of any further investigation and left it at that. Since then, I have not had any encounters with it. Even now, the entire situation continues to frighten me, prompting me to seek answers whenever I've had the chance. For those wondering as to why I waited so long to share and tell the story, let it be known that I didn't want this thing going after me. It intimidated me, and I admit that. I was only 14 when it happened, and I was scared of the consequences. And in the further years stuff started happening that required more of my attention. Which eventually led me to assume that this was just something I'd have to take to my grave. All I ask is for closure. What did I really see that day? A tall black figure is watching me. This all started when I was younger, about 7 or 8. My sister and I used to play a game where one of us jumped on one side of the mattress and the other flew into the air. My sister was in the shower one day, and I remember I wanted to play really bad, and I kept yelling at her to hurry so we could play the bouncy game. Well then, imagine my surprise when the mattress lifted up, a little at first, and I thought my sister was hiding under the bed, so I told her she needed to push harder to send me flying. All bets were off at that point, the mattress was jumping, and I was having the time of my life flying up in the air. I said I needed a break, but the mattress kept jumping, so I looked under the bed to find it completely empty. The mattress stopped jumping, and panic set in. My mom came in, and I told her what happened, but she didn't believe me and made my sister sit and watch my mattress with me after she got out of the shower. My sister and I are 11 months apart, with me being the younger sibling. We sat there and watched for about 30 minutes. Well, my sister got up to leave, and the mattress started rising. I told her to turn around, and my mattress literally rose and bent in half before falling back down. We ran screaming and crying to my mom, but she still didn't believe us. That was the first incident. No idea if these two events are related, but something tells me they are. The next time I was about 11, and it was definitely after midnight. I had purple sheer curtains instead of a door to my room. Ever since I was little, if someone came into my room while I was sleeping, I instantly woke up. Sometimes, I would wake up feeling something was wrong, but there would be nothing there. This night was different. I don't know why I woke up, but I felt a sense of dread and began to think about being kidnapped, which led me to consider places to hide when I saw it. It was around 7 to 8 feet tall, and it ducked through my curtains. It was all black, and I couldn't see any features, not even eyes. It was just a tall black humanoid figure. It moved towards me like it was jumping dimensions. It didn't really walk. I started to cry, and I kept screaming at it not to take me. It came and put its hand on my forehead, and I could tell that it wasn't going to hurt me. It seemed sad that I was scared of it. I could feel its emotions, but I could also feel that it was going to take me away that night, so I kept screaming. My mom ran into my room, and it disappeared. Ever since that night, every now and again I can feel it watching me. The air changes, and I just know that it is there. I recently turned 18, and last year I started to feel something touching my back at night, like rubbing circles before I would sleep, and I looked out of the corner of my eye, and it was the thing. I didn't mean to scare it, so every time it happens I pretend to sleep. I see it more and more, just glimpses, but I really want to know what this thing is. Any help would be appreciated. Thanks. Puerto Rico encounter 1989. Location, Peña Blanca, Puerto Rico. Date, early July 1989. Time, 1800. A local angler, Orlando Katake, was returning from fishing in the beach area when he noticed a group of bright white points of light hovering and turning just above the ground nearby. The man chased the lights and suddenly lost them behind a small tree. As the witness walked behind the tree, he came upon two very tall men standing next to a boulder on the ground. One held his hand on his chest and told the witness not to approach. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and the witness felt paralyzed, unable to move. The two men were described as very tall and identical in appearance, with light skin, blue eyes, and light brown shoulder-length hair. They were well built and strong. They both wore brilliant white tunics with an open v-neck. They spoke to the witness and warned him of a coming catastrophe. They said that the Earth was going to become a cold, desolate planet once more. He was then told to turn around and remain still. He then felt a heat blast behind him and saw a bright flash. The two men had disappeared. Later at home he realized that he had lost 3 hours of time and could only remember seeing a long, sleek, submarine-like object that used energy from the water for its propulsion. Has anyone experienced anything like this? So this happened to me and my mom a few years ago. We were talking in the living room. It was daylight outside, and the shutters were closed. There was no light turned on inside of the living room, and all the light that we could see came from the outside through the shutters. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room became very heavy, causing us to stop talking. For some reason, we both instantly looked at the windows. We could obviously see through the shutters a silhouette of a human figure walking by, as if he or she were outside of the house. I don't know how to best describe it if not by a shadow. The shadow of that person was very dark itself, like Vantablack or something. It was very, very chilling. I remember feeling very dense/heavy, like I couldn't talk or move, as it was walking by. My mom and I tried to recreate it. One of us stayed inside while the other walked by outside, like the figure, but it was very different. Has this ever happened to anyone? Does anyone know what this might suggest? Something has been following me for a long time. I'll start with my first experience. In high school, around 2007, I experienced what I thought was a dream of me waking up abruptly in bed to find my door opening seconds later on its own, with a tall, lanky creature standing at the doorway. I could not move, and I could not feel any emotion whatsoever. I watched as this thing stood at my doorway, taller than the door, where its mouth was barely visible due to its height. These experiences would end by the door closing by itself as the thing stood there watching me. These experiences would last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. This happened 3 nights in a time of 1 month. During the first 2 occurrences, I thought it was either sleep paralysis or a dream. However, during the third occurrence, I remained awake until my mother came in to wake me up for school. I understood then that it was not a dream and that I remained conscious throughout the entire experience. The second series of when I saw it was when I was at a friend's house. It was midday, and looking through his dark hallway, I felt paralyzed again. My friend was inside his room grabbing some airsoft guns to play with. I could hear him talking and his TV going in his room when I saw this thing crawling on the right wall, large again and eyes very focused on me. Its eyes were large and wouldn't look away from me for even a second. When I heard my friend starting to come towards the door to the hallway, the thing backed off slowly until I could no longer see it. I then felt in control, and my emotions started surfacing again. I then felt concern and fear because this time I'd seen it midday and wasn't tired or fatigued in any way. My friend came out, saw my face, looked down the hall, and said, "Let's go." The third time I had an experience with this creature was many years down the line, in 2011. I had joined the Marines, and I was on a combat deployment in Afghanistan. We stayed in what we called a hooch, which was just a large tent-like building that held 20 guys in military-style cots. I had woken up to my senior Marine, who I did not talk to as a friend or buddy considering he was my superior, telling me he had a weird dream about me. I had told nobody of these stories in fear of being messed with or told I was crazy. I'd rather keep it to myself unless it caused me harm or harm to others. He continued to tell me about this dream of him waking up, looking over towards me sleeping on the cot, and seeing a very large creature standing over me, and he explained exactly how it had looked. He then laughed and said, "It's good to see you're still here." I laughed because I didn't want to sound crazy. He had seen it too, and since then I haven't seen it, but I've felt times of paralysis at random moments. I've just never seen it. Any suggestions or advice? I'm not entirely certain about what I'm dealing with. My mom also claims to have seen some creature looking into her room off of a wall around the corner, but I'm not taking that as something related to mine. I regret the last-minute decision I made to go to the beach at 3 a.m. this morning. Late last night, my daughter, 21, her friend, 21, and I, 43, had spent the evening at a drag show in Galveston, Texas. After the show we decided to drive down to the beach for a few minutes before we headed home. The beach we typically visit was distant from our location, and given that it was nearly 3 a.m., we opted to stop at a beach access point that we had not previously visited. I drove in a circle to shine the headlights around so we could check the area before getting out. I parked next to a trash can close to the dunes. As soon as we exited the car, I experienced an inexplicable heaviness. Something felt off, and my instinct urged me to get back in the car immediately and leave. I wish I would have. I didn't find out until later that my daughter and her friend had the same feeling. There was no moon, so the only light was from a few beach houses on the other side of the dunes. I keep a huge baton flashlight/taser in my car, so I grabbed it, and we walked down to the water. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my daughter's friend turn around really fast and look back towards the car. She had heard a sound coming from the direction of the dunes. She grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward my car, and she and I both saw something standing right up against it. Neither of us was exactly sure of what we were looking at because it seemed to fade away when the flashlight hit it. It's so hard to describe, but it was like you could only see it in the edge of the light from the flashlight. Like it only existed between light and dark. I grabbed the flashlight back and shined it directly where it was standing, and it was gone. Just kind of disappeared. It was very surreal. This heaviness that I felt when we first got there was suddenly unbearable, and we all knew we had to leave as quickly as possible, but we were all kind of frozen in fear. We slowly made our way back to the car, but as we got close, my daughter and her friend saw the same figure crouched down next to the trash can with its back facing them. It was eerily silent as we ran to the car, jumped in, and sped off. It was complete silence in the car for a few minutes until we got down the road a bit. Then I asked if they wanted to talk about what we just saw, and we all just collectively freaked the absolute duck out, tears and everything. My daughter only saw it from the front for a split second, but her friend and I looked directly at it, and we both described exactly the same thing. Judging by the height of my car, we estimated it to be at least 6'2" 6'5". It was very tall and slim. It had a human-like shape, but its face appeared blank with two black spaces where the eyes should be, as if the eyes were present but deeply sunk in. Its face had the shape of a long Gandalf-type beard, but it was fleshy, not hair. It had really long arms, one of which was resting on the top of my car at the back passenger door. It seemed to be wearing what looked like a robe, but it was part of the creature. Its flesh resembled the shape of long robe sleeves. No hands, just long fleshy flaps. It was just standing there kind of slouching, like it wasn't standing up all the way. And it just stared blankly at us, almost through us. When I say a heavy feeling, we could physically feel some sort of presence as soon as we had gotten there. I have never felt so much anxiety, fear, and terror in my life. I have no idea what we saw, but since it happened, I have been experiencing a lingering sense of wariness throughout my entire body that I can't seem to shake. My daughter says she feels the same way. Every time we talk about it, we experience chills. My encounter with a possible Mexican skinwalker. I wanted to share about the time I was visiting relatives in Mexico in the mid-1990s, and believe me, my friends and I encountered a possible skinwalker. My ancestors came from a tiny town, and back then, everyone had outhouses due to no actual plumbing or even underground water lines. I believe this is still the case. It's pretty remote, and there are other surrounding towns with similar circumstances. There is hardly anything to do other than to hang out, play some sport, go up near the mountains, etc. This one evening, we were hanging out with a buddy whose family owned a small store. I can't even remember all the stuff we were talking about now, but at some point, my cousin started talking about this old man that we all knew. As far as I can remember, he was probably in his late 60s, didn't have any family I could recall, and lived alone in his house/property. In my cousin's own words, he used to tell me how he would escape his enemies by disappearing. He said they would step all over him and that it would hurt, but that he needed to keep quiet so he wouldn't be discovered. Now, this old man already had a reputation for being a witch, and that's what some people referred to him as. I always thought that the locals called him that because he was a bit antisocial, old, and had seemingly had no friends. But my cousin would occasionally greet him as we walked through town, simply saying, "Hey, mister, how's it going? Hey, mister, how's it going?" My cousin and the other kids from that town discussed how mysterious he was and expressed their belief that he practiced black magic. So after we were done talking, it was probably around 10 p.m., the store had already been closed since like 6 p.m. or so, and my buddy wanted to keep it shut so that we could keep talking about whatever without anyone listening. After we left, we noticed that the old man's house was about 3 properties away from the store. While we were still discussing it, he appeared to be looking over his 6-foot-tall adobe wall, and since he wasn't very tall himself, he might have been standing on a chair. He leaned over the wall with a creepy ear-to-ear smile on his face, nodding his head up and down as he watched us walk down the unpaved road. This road, like many others in our very small town, lacked 20th century features. And at that point, we were all creeped out, and it scared the shit out of us. Of course, there's no way to tell if he really was a skinwalker, but at that point, I firmly believed he was something evil, and I wanted nothing to do with him. And the reason I think he was a skinwalker, years later, is because in that small town, like just about every small Mexican town, there are always certain people that are accused of practicing black magic. Most times, these people are accused of being lechuzas, who are supposed to be witches that transform into owls. So the fact that my cousin said he could disappear, I figured now that means he can transform, and that is why I now believe he was a skinwalker. Did his black magic powers help him realize we were talking about him? Because otherwise, what the hell was he doing leaning over the wall with that creepy smile like that? At a time of night when most people were asleep? Just thought that was weird and ominous. Most times, people refer to skinwalkers as folks in the US, particularly natives. But now that I think about it, skinwalkers have always been prevalent in Mexico, except we don't call them that. However, one should be able to see the overlapping culture between Mexico and native Indian tribes. Sighting near Nakalula Falls, Alabama, 2023. One day I was having a sleepover at a friend's house, having a barbecue/pool party, and we were admiring the scenery of the surrounding area because it was particularly beautiful that day. As my buddy Addie and I were getting out of the pool, we saw a tall, skinny, dark green creature that appeared to have moss and flowers on it run by, which scared us immensely. That was the only time we saw it that night. However, for the next few days, we heard clicking and a strange screech every few hours, which stopped at night while it rained continuously. Shadowy figure running across country roads at night. This happened in west central Illinois. The first occurrence took place approximately 6 months ago, around 1 to 2 a.m. It was storming, and I was driving home from work, about an hour commute, and my normal exit was blocked off due to a semi going into the ditch nearby. I rerouted my GPS, took a different, unfamiliar way home, and ended up going through a wind turbine farm. For context, I have megalophobia, and specifically wind turbines really freak me out because they're so big. At night they have blinking red lights, it's very ominous. Plus the lightning would light up the sky once in a while, and I'd see a flash of it. Anyway, the point is, I was in a high stress state on an unfamiliar country road lol. When this happened, I was probably 15 to 20 miles away from my house. So I take a left turn, and as I'm about to straighten out the wheel, I see a black, shadowy, vaguely humanoid figure, probably 7 to 8 feet tall, move across the road very quickly. I use the word move because it looked like it was sprinting, but there was no impact when its feet would hit the ground. It moved smoothly, like it was floating. I could see the vague outline of abnormally long arms and legs. The silhouette was kind of hazy, so any outlines I saw, I'm not even sure I actually saw. It was just a black mass, like, if it was sprinting, there was no visible space between its body and limbs, if that makes sense. Like it was surrounded by a black mist or vapor or something. Incredibly hard to describe. My headlights were shining on it, but it was completely black, like it absorbed no light. It happened so fast that I couldn't register what I was looking at. It ran into a cornfield, and I drove the rest of the way home sobbing and paranoid. I also got this awful gut feeling, like an overwhelming sense of dread, right around the time I saw it. From what I remember, it was like the gut feeling hit first, and then I saw the figure within seconds. It happened so fast that I can't even trust my own memory. It didn't seem fazed by me either. Didn't shift its attention towards me, look at me, or acknowledge my presence at all. It just seemed to be on a mission to run into the cornfield. No distinguishable features, no visible face or clothing, nothing but black. My partner and parents believed me and made me feel like I'm not crazy. My grandparents used to live in our current house, and they said they'd actually seen similar things in this area over the last 30 to 40 years. But it's been long enough that I've tried to forget about it and convinced myself it was a hallucination or just my imagination from being in a stressful situation. Now, on to the next occurrence. My parents, uncle, and cousins were outside our house tonight. I live with my parents, my uncle and cousins were visiting, and I was inside, and heard some sort of noise. My mom said it didn't sound like any animals that would be around here but more like a person celebrating, saying woo-woo, or something similar. It sounded like it was coming from the front yard, so they shined a flashlight in that direction and saw nothing. That's not the weird part. They ordered pizza delivery earlier in the night, and shortly after hearing this noise, the delivery driver shows up. She seemed shook up and told my mom that she saw some sort of shadowy figure run across our road just moments ago. We live on a gravel road, maybe half-mile away from a county highway and the nearest neighbor. She described it in almost the exact same way I did, abnormally long limbs, dark and shadowy even with the headlights directly on it, moved very quickly across the road, and moved so smoothly that it looked like it was floating. It scared the absolute shit out of her. I don't know if the noise they heard is related or not, but it's weird that they said it sounded so close. All our neighbors are elderly folks and farmers and aren't close enough to hear that clearly. Some animals around here make weird sounds. Has anyone ever heard a caterwauling barred owl? They sound like monkeys, so I'm choosing to believe it was an animal. But it really freaks me out that this woman saw the same thing that I did, and it's closer to my house now. Like, literally, less than half a mile away. My mom is a pretty hardcore Christian and made a comment about how maybe it followed me home, which I don't necessarily believe, but at this point I'm considering all options. If anyone else has seen something similar or has any insight, I'd love to hear. Also, I have no history of hallucinations. I have absolutely considered that as an option, but hearing the exact same description from someone else really weirded me out. I haven't told anyone other than family, so I'm super curious to hear other perspectives. Has anyone in SoCal seen a tall, faceless man wandering around at night? And I'm not talking about Slender Man. This is my first time ever sharing on here. I'm 15, living in Southern California with my mom, dad, and brother. One night, my dad and I were driving down a road we typically take to get ice cream. There are no streetlights in my neighborhood, some odd aesthetic choice, but the car lights definitely work just fine. There's this particular house with a super duper long driveway, so long you can't see the house, with brush surrounding it and trash cans at the bottom. When we passed, I spotted this abnormally tall man looking thing sort of hunched over, almost in an upside down V. He had really long black hair, wore dark blue overalls, and, from what I could tell, had no face. It freaked me the duck out. Maybe I'm scarred from too many late night horror stories when I was 8, but I'm certain that was some type of person. Even my dad, who usually doesn't get scared easily, found himself spooked throughout the entire ride. I'd practically forgotten about it a couple days later, until I was walking around my backyard with my dog around sundown. Our backyard's very big, we have a guest house, sort of tucked in the corner. Beyond that, there's a drop in woods on one side and a small canyon on the other. My dog and I were at the front of the guest house, a little bit away from the actual front door. My dog went around the corner, started barking uncontrollably, and sprinted back to me. I looked through the window next to the guest house door, which was a straight shot to the back window looking out to the woods. I saw a blurry figure, almost turned away from me, with those same overalls. His arms, also weirdly long, were splayed a little out, like he was trying to appear as something. It was distorted because of how far away it was, but I absolutely hauled ass out of there up to my house. My dad went down to investigate after, but there was nothing. I still haven't gone back down. I'm asking if other people have seen this guy because I remember seeing a video a little while back talking about faceless people spotted around in SoCal. And if you've seen them anywhere else, please let me know. I'm more curious than anything. I encountered a humanoid figure. Last year, somewhere in Europe, I got up around 6 a.m. I was fully awake, freshened up, and opened my curtains. It was still dark out, however, there were enough streetlights to see everything clearly. I looked outside and saw a figure standing with its back towards me. It was fully cloaked, and hooded, in white, and it wasn't holding anything. I would describe it as the Grim Reaper. In white. It was standing completely still facing towards a fence. My heart dropped, so I moved away from my window, only to look again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The moment I attempted to see what or who it was, it slowly turned around, but best believe I closed my curtains before I would encounter the sight of its face. I panicked, took a few breaths, and peeked in the slightest way possible, but it was gone. Literally vanished into thin air within seconds. I assumed it must have been a shadow person, but those can usually be distinguished easily. This human was far too vivid. It never happened again after that one time. Has anyone ever experienced anything similar? I was fully sober, not taking any medication, and I have no history of mental health issues. Green glowing apparitions appeared in my backyard. This happened when I was 6, so in 2006, in Switzerland. During that time my family owned restaurants, and sometimes relatives from Thailand visited and worked at the restaurants to make some money. During that time, my mom's cousin was over, and he stayed in my room, sleeping with me because it had 2 separate beds. Alright, here it goes. First of all, I am fairly certain it wasn't a dream because it felt incredibly real. However, I do wonder if it might have been a dream, though I strongly believe it wasn't. We were sleeping until my relative woke me up later that night. By then, the room was already lit up with a green hue from the light outside. He called me over to his bed, which was the one next to the window. A window that overlooked the backyard. I remember him telling me to be quiet, and we whispered. I asked him what's going on, and he just tells me to look out the window. I did, and I swear, I saw green glowing apparitions. I was unable to distinguish any definitive characteristics, other than them having a humanoid form and maybe wearing a hazmat suit. Maybe that was just an illusion because they were quite bulky. I think there were at least 3, but I can't remember clearly. We both stared at them for a bit, as it was so fascinating. I mean, how many times do you come across such beings? They glowed green, had a robust build, and moved in a flowing, watery, rapid, yet quite twitchy manner. It's so hard to describe. Maybe a good 5 minutes went by just watching them move about and dig into the ground. Yes, digging into the ground. I can't remember whether they were burying something or retrieving it. They never looked up at the window, so we just kept staring. I recall us whispering and trying to figure out what was happening. We continued to observe until it gradually became somewhat familiar to us, and that was when my relative suggested we should return to sleep. So I did, and that was that. Now you might think that the next morning we would discuss it again, but I can't remember doing such a thing. I think the next morning I didn't even remember the incident anymore, or maybe I was just not thinking about it. It never came back to mind, so I never went to check the backyard and never talked about it with my relative. I never really went to the backyard before the incident anyway, so I never went there afterwards, meaning I never really recalled the memory. And then we moved out a year later. At the new place, I also experienced a paranormal event. Perhaps I will share more about it next time. A Vietnam GI has an encounter with reptilian beings. In 1970 I was serving as a corporal in the US Army, deployed to South Vietnam in a region about 30 miles south of the DMZ. At the time I was second in command of a squad of soldiers. We had set up a bivouac in a jungle area that had a few steep hills. That evening my section was ordered to patrol one of the small valleys west of the encampment. We moved out, led by our sergeant. Not long after entering one of the small valleys, we detected movement ahead of us. It seemed to be scattered activity, so we doubted it was VC, but we weren't positive. We hunkered down for about 15 minutes, getting occasional glimpses of something moving within the trees and brush. There wasn't enough light to detect what we were observing even though the moonlight was bright that night. After a while the activity halted, so we continued to move slowly through the valley. As we approached a sheer wall on the hill, it looked like someone or something had stacked large stones and boulders in the pass in front of us. There was also an opening in the hillside that looked like a cave entrance, approximately 5 feet high and 3 feet wide, narrowing at the top. When observing the passageway, it appeared to have been cut away by machinery. The edges were smooth with small, evenly spaced grooves. We were puzzled by this because we had never seen enemy caves like this, just underground tunnels. The sergeant suggested that it may be a VC supply depot, so we started to assess how we were going to investigate the cave. About this time, things got very strange. We began to notice a putrid odor emanating from the cave entrance. The only thing I can compare it to was rotting eggs and human decay. It was so revolting that a few of the soldiers were becoming ill and started to back away into the jungle, including the sergeant. I was directing a light into the entrance to observe anything, but there was a haze that was impossible to see through. We had no idea what was before us. The entire squad took a position in the heavy brush approximately 150 feet from the entrance, far enough not to be detected but close enough to observe the cave entrance. We quietly remained there for what seemed like forever. The jungle was strangely calm, though we heard rumbling sounds coming from the distance. It was really eerie. The sergeant was sitting near me talking to himself. It was obvious that he was frightened. I was looking at the rest of the squad. Each had wide eyes and was scanning the area. No one was going to doze off during this patrol. After several hours, dawn was approaching, and it started to lighten up. I checked my watch. It was just before 5 a.m. Just then we noticed movement in front of the cave. A being, I first thought it was a man, moved through the entrance to the clearing in front of the cave. As it stood up from a crouch, it stood at least 7 feet high and started to look in our direction. Another creature with a similar appearance was emerging from the cave at that moment. They were making hellish hissing sounds and looking directly at us. The only way I can describe these beings is that they looked like upright lizards. The scaly, shiny skin was very dark, almost black. They had faces resembling snakes, with large, forward-set eyes. They had arms and legs like humans but had scaly skin. I didn't notice a tail, though they wore long, dark green, one-piece robes along with a dark cap-like covering on their heads. I never noticed if they had anything on their feet. No one gave the order. It seemed like the entire squad opened fire at once. Every piece of vegetation between us and them was quickly sheared away. I yelled out a ceasefire order. At the same time I was looking in the direction of the cave. There was nothing there. We immediately checked our flank in case these things circled around us, but there was nothing. As we approached the cave, ready to resume action if needed, it became apparent that the beings had escaped, most likely back into the cave. It was soon decided to set charges and close the cave entrance. When we returned to camp, we all seemed to be in a daze. There was little discussion of the incident, and we were never debriefed, so I know the sergeant never filed a report. Then again, if he did, it was kept quiet by the brass. I think I saw a tall female ghost dressed in white, and I'm very anxious after an online search. Hello. I'm very new to this. I live in a fairly tragic area. It's a place where there's an old abandoned asylum, hospital, and prison and possibly a burial ground somewhere near. While I was at the local park with a friend, I noticed a woman with her head down at the edge of a wooded area that has a small field clearing. There was nothing I could have mistaken for this, and I was not tired. I'm personally a skeptic, but I'm also very anxious, and Google tells me that seeing her is an omen of death. Or it could be the ghost of someone who experienced a lot of tragedy and haunts a tragic place. Is either one true? Honestly, I am unsure how I will be able to sleep. There are shape-shifting creatures in India. Most skinwalker sightings occur in the US, but I have heard a few allegedly true stories of similar shape-shifting entities here in India. I have heard stories from my grandfather and my mother's grandfather about their encounters, to be exact. Here I'll narrate my mother's grandpa's, let's call him John, story. It happened in the 50s, and in those days the population of the area we live in was quite low. So adjacent villages were pretty far from each other. And the main mode of transport was horses. One evening after sunset he was returning home on his horse on a very lonely road. There was nothing but farmland and trees on both sides as far as he could see. Suddenly, in the distance, he saw a large white lamb/baby goat-like animal just standing in the middle of the road facing him. There were many jackals in the area, so John took pity and decided to carry the lamb/goat home along with him. He approached it and picked it up and placed it on his horse such that the animal was in front of him on its side with its legs dangling across either side of the horse. It must have been half an hour after that, when it was getting a little dark, that John heard scratching noises coming from below. He looked and saw that the legs of the animal had seemingly grown so long that they were literally rubbing across the road as they were moving. He got so scared that he just threw it across the road and quickly ran away on his horse, but that didn't end there. When he was close to his home but still not inside the village, he saw a disgusting-looking woman on the side of the road who started running alongside him. She was begging him to let her on the horse continuously. She ran away when human settlement came into view. John got a high fever after the incident and was in his bed for a few days. He is now very old, and he told me this story. I think whatever he saw matches the qualities of a skinwalker. What do you guys think? Goblin-like creature in house. Hello, what do people think this thing was? A demon, goblin, or something else? Why was it in my house? This took place in a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota, around 2015. My father was a police officer for 30 years. He is a respected member of the city council and an all-around reliable dude. He told me that a few years back he walked into the bathroom late at night to get ready for bed, and a 4-foot-tall demon thing was standing on the bathroom rug facing him. He didn't feel scared but sensed that the creature was just being annoying. It had long arms hanging almost to the floor and had brown fur, but wasn't super hairy. He said it had a bat-like face, but not quite as smushed. His first reaction was to say, "In the name of Jesus, leave my house." He said it just kind of stared at him, then jumped up and vanished through the closed bathroom window. No broken glass. End of story. There is a humanoid toddler-like entity that seems to be connected to the women in my mother's family. I need help identifying the entity that is connected to the women on my mother's side of the family. So, as a precursor, my grandmother's home was originally a coal camp house, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, living room, and kitchen. As a child her father died in the mines he worked in, and they got a large amount of money. They built onto the home. Many paranormal things have occurred here. The most troublesome thing that has continued occurring is the appearance of a toddler-sized entity. It does not look transparent or ghostly. It looks as real as me or you. It has bright red hair and a toddler-sized body. What's unsettling is that it has adult facial features. The first time I saw it I was 14 and just encountering puberty. One day I was sitting in my grandmother's living room. It was just me and her in the house. Through my peripheral vision, I saw it. It crawled from the edge of my vision from behind my chair and just crawled to the center of the room. It stopped in the center and turned its head to smile at me. Then it crawled into a hallway, and upon looking, it was nowhere to be found. Its occurrences follow this pattern. It never speaks, never crawls towards you. Only away. It only happens if there are only women in the house. My grandmother's came into the room after I looked for where it went. I know I was sickly white. I cannot explain the feeling that came over me when this happened. I was frozen with pure terror, and my mind felt almost clouded with confusion. When she saw me, she said, "So you finally saw it." She explained that all the women in the family see it every now and then and that it won't hurt me. She warned me to not approach it or speak to it when I see it. Just see it and then ignore it. According to her, her mother saw it as well as herself and my mother. I'm now 21 and don't know a lot about our family history, but I wonder if anyone has had experiences with entities of this kind. I know that our ancestry is largely Irish/Scottish, but not much else. The thing only happens in her house, thank goodness. I would greatly appreciate any information. I saw a strange figure standing in my doorway, and I need help. Around Monday or Tuesday of this week I was sitting at my desk, picking up my PlayStation controller as I had previously set it down. I looked over slightly and saw what seemed to be the head of a gray, fog-like creature peeking out from under my desk, which had pitch black areas where its eyes should be and a long, stretched black mouth. Of course I reacted like a sane person and yelled and jumped back. My brother asked me what was wrong, and I tried to tell him that I had seen a face, but he didn't believe me. After that nothing really happened besides whenever I close my eyes I see a person burning. I can vividly see them grabbing at their face. It isn't lifelike, though, it looks like a drawing. It's been happening every time I close my eyes to sleep. On Thursday of this week I was trying to sleep, I was restless, so I rolled over to see if there was anything going on in my room, and I looked to my door, keep in mind my lights were off, and saw a tall jet black figure who could barely fit in my doorway, average doorway. The thing was very skinny. It looked like he was studying me like I was a creature to be watched in a petting zoo. The creature looked like it was moving its head around, but I couldn't see it well because it didn't have any facial features and my room was dark. Whenever I saw it, I locked eyes with it for 10-15 seconds, and I rubbed my eyes to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The creature started to laugh, its arms grabbed at its sides as if I was the funniest joke it's ever seen. I turn over and turn back to it, and it is still there, it didn't leave. I yelled at my brother to turn on the lights, but of course I took my eyes off of the thing to look at my brother, but as soon as I turned back to the monster, it had left. I tried to play it off cool and acted like I wanted to go into the closet and change into more comfortable clothes. I did and then went back to try and sleep. I never looked at the door again that night. Alien spotted in the woods. This encounter, or more of an observation, happened this summer. I live in the Northeast United States. Behind my house are a couple acres of woods that reach cliffs and a farm. As much as possible I'd be in the woods with friends or family. I enjoy riding dirt bikes and creating new trails in the woods. Many times, I take my dogs for walks there during daylight hours. It was just any other weekend for me. I brought my 2 purebred American labs in the woods with me. One on a leash, the other running free. It was past noon but not late by any means, somewhere in the afternoon, so visibility was at its highest. The canopy is sparse throughout the hill, where most of the trails have been made by the owner of the property. So sunlight reaches the forest floor, it's summer, and it's bright. We're on our way down the hill, going down a side trail from the main, wider one. I've been down it many times, and at the end it flattens out in a plain where it comes to the edge of the woods and houses begin. So it was really close to the house of the owner of the woods. He's a really old man who drives his tractor around and cuts down firewood. He's also friendly and lives alone. As I'm walking, approaching the plain, I look out over what I can see through the underbrush and foliage. Normal lively colors of nature. I think it started with my unleashed dog taking off. However, it may have been after I noticed the beings in front of us. They weren't on the trail, they were in the middle of the woods. 2 of them, human-sized, wearing really clean, sleek space suits. Upon seeing them I felt comfort, nothing close to fear. I think I didn't feel scared because they were so clean-looking and future cyborg-like. But they had equipment next to them, which I thought resembled future-looking rifles from Call of Duty or something. They were riding along on a quad-type hovercraft. The ground they were covering was definitely bumpy with fallen logs, but they remained motionless. Just floating over the forest floor, passing in front of some trees and behind others. So I could tell the relative distance from them to me. It was no more than 75 feet. They were close, and I could make out a lot of features. They had full-length, normal-sized arms, and there was a large windshield on their helmets. They didn't notice me, and I only watched them for maybe 10 seconds. My dog took off after them, I think. Or he smelled something in their general direction. But maybe he saw them too. The dog I had leashed didn't react. I just kept up basically in stride with them while watching because I wasn't scared somehow. It all happened so suddenly and was pretty awesome. I think it was just an overlap, or maybe they teleported to a dimension they didn't mean to? I don't know, I think they made a mistake, or the universe just wanted our paths to cross. Maybe some of you have seen similar beings. My only guess for the equipment was hunting rifles because a lot of people do that in those woods. But why would they be back in time hunting animals now? It may seem absurd, but so does the idea of them being there in the first place. I didn't hear any noise coming from them throughout the experience. This is my first time sharing it, I feel like my family would ridicule me and dismiss it as a symptom of my drug use, despite my being sober during the experience and never having a real drug problem. Either way, I'll never forget it. The 7 featuring Shadow Man. So basically, back in 2016, my mom, sister, and I moved into this rental at the end of a street. We only stayed in this house for 6 months before moving out because of this 7-foot shadow man. When we first had the home open for the house, we were not aware of the horrid cigarette smell that would later follow each of us into rooms. We only noticed it when we moved in. On the first day of moving in, I was taking a shower and could smell the aroma of cigarettes. Fresh ones. I don't smoke, and neither does my mom or sister, she is 14. I brought this up to my mom, and she said, "It must be the neighbors." The cigarette smell was so prominent in the front master bedroom that my mom moved into the back room, which was next to my bedroom. Then, there were cigarette stub marks burnt into the carpet of the master room that started to appear after the first few weeks of us being there. We ended up leaving that room to be spare. After a month of us living at this house, we were becoming more and more aware of sudden cold spots and whiffs of smoke that would happen when every door and window was closed. It was only when my mom asked the real estate agent who the previous owner was that we found out that he was a heavy smoker and died from emphysema. One night my mom and I went out shopping and had left my sister at home. It was only 8 o'clock when my sister called my mom in hysterics, saying that there was a man inside our house. When we came home, she was distraught, pale-faced and shaking. She started to describe that she opened her door to this 7-foot shadow man with white eyes that stared down at her in the hallway. I have never in my entire life seen my sister so shaken by something that it even scared me. After this, she couldn't sleep and wouldn't come out of her room at night. My mom and I tried to brush it off and tell her that it was her imagination, but it 100% wasn't. After I had finished a close shift at my old job, I came home at around 2 a.m., fast food jobs for you. My mom was out at her boyfriend's, and my sister was sleeping over at her friend's. So I was home alone. I was just sitting in my bedroom when I heard someone leave my mom's room, walk down the hallway into the kitchen, open the fridge door, close it, and walk back into my mom's room. I thought that my mom had come home and decided not to stay out. So I brushed it off and went to bed. The next morning when I woke up, my mom came home with my sister at 10 a.m. I asked her what time she came home last night, only for her to tell me that she wasn't home all night. I honestly had never been so shocked because I had sworn I heard someone walking into the kitchen. She said it was nothing and could have been the dog. Yeah, right. A few nights later I woke up in the middle of the night to something sitting on the end of my bed. I thought nothing of it, as my cat usually jumps up and sleeps on the end of my bed. I opened my eyes and didn't see my cat. Instead, I saw a large shadow figure sitting down on the edge of my bed, staring at me. I was absolutely frozen to the core. I didn't know what else to do but pretend to go back to sleep. I opened my eyes again, and it had disappeared. I went back to bed but not before turning my light on. After 5 months of being at the house, my mom had had enough of the house. She only told me after we moved out that she also saw the man. She didn't want to tell us, as it would freak us out even more. We found our current house, and now we joke about the shadow man. I think we are all just glad to be out of there. A dark figure standing on a hill. A little information about the place where I saw the figure. It's a high hill next to the main street in here. The hill is visible from the street. Anyway, this hill is a really relaxing place, especially during twilight, and that's why I often go there during my late walks. The incident happened 3 days ago as I was on my way there. I was walking the main street, and when I looked towards the hill, I saw a dark figure, almost like a shadow, standing right where I usually stand. The figure wasn't skinny or super tall, it just reminded me of a normal average man, but it was completely black. It wasn't just someone wearing all black clothes because even then you can see some shades, but with this, nothing. Even if the face was just black, the hill is close enough to the street that you should be able to see some facial features. I was frozen in place but not petrified, just shocked. I stared at the figure for about 5 minutes to see if it would move, but no, it just stood there in place, not moving an inch. Eventually I backed up a little bit and ran home. When I revisited the location the following day, I noticed that many of the weeds surrounding the spot had burned. I don't think I'll be going there late anymore. Does anyone know what this was about, or has anyone had any similar experiences? A 15-foot humanoid was watching me and my friend in the woods. My friend and I were in the woods last night in Slate Mountain, North Carolina, enjoying ourselves and planning to leave, when my friend suddenly exclaimed, "What the duck is that?" As we reached about halfway up a 40-foot hill. I looked over and saw a humanoid figure with a pale white face, roughly the size of my body, that had no eye sockets, just black holes for eyes, and no mouth. Its jaw hung open crookedly and was positioned far from its face. It freaked me out, and I said, "Why does it look like that?" And we just ran up the ducking hill. I only saw its face, but my friend saw its body, and it's really, really skinny. I know I wasn't imagining things, and I am quite brave, so I plan to return to the woods tonight to find out what it was. If I find it, I'm taking a picture and running. If anyone could, please tell me what this is. 10 truly strange humanoid encounters. 1. 8-foot-tall aliens. On August 7, 1954, two brothers, Gabriel and Henri Couple, were picking peas on their family farm in Saint Bernard de la Colle, Canada, when a glowing spherical-shaped craft appeared and hovered overhead. 3 8-foot-tall humanoids emerged. The boys ran home and alerted their family, who saw the UFO, as did several neighbors. Later, strange landing traces were discovered. 2. That UFO was looking for me. One evening in November 1966, 3 people observed strange lights over their home in rural Medford, Oregon. The next night, the 8-year-old son went outside and was shocked to see a 4-foot-tall figure dressed in sparkling blue clothes. As he fled in panic, the being spoke sweetly to him telepathically. Nobody believed him, but later, the UFOs would return. 3. It was not a monster. One afternoon in January 1967, an anonymous engineer was walking in the woods near Riachuelo, Chile, when he saw a strange light through the trees. Approaching, he was shocked to see a saucer-shaped craft hovering in a clearing. Moments later, a strange-looking man appeared. He had white skin and long white hair and wore a transparent white uniform. He re-entered the craft, which left quickly. 4. He looked directly into my eyes. On the night of August 18, 1971, Jonah was camping in the wilderness of Carmel Valley, California, when a gray alien approached his campsite. It approached the witness and established a telepathic connection. It then deposited an object beneath a log and left. Later, the witness retrieved the object, which turned out to be a book. The witness reports many psychic events. 5. We clung to one another with fear. On the night of August 18, 1978, 2 young brothers were driving near Harvey, Michigan. Suddenly a craft appeared overhead, and looking out at them from a window in the craft were 2 humanoids. Terrified, the 2 boys fled the scene. Arriving home, they reported the sighting to the local Air Force base. Shortly later, the UFO returned over their home. 6. IT returned 8 times. One evening in August 1978, the Martinhoz family of Fuceta, Portugal, was shocked by the appearance of a sphere-shaped craft hovering right over their home. Over the next 2 months, the craft returned at least 8 times. On one occasion, it landed, and humanoids emerged. On another occasion, it hovered next to their neighbor's home, and a lady looked inside and saw 2 aliens. 7. Father and son aliens. Looking outside his living room on the night of August 6, 1980, Matthew saw strange lights outside his home in rural Mouston, Wisconsin. Stepping outside to investigate, he saw a massive craft hovering overhead. To his amazement, 2 humanoid figures were looking down at him. As they moved off, Matthew had the impression that the 2 ETs were father and son. 8. Something almost divine. One night in August 1993, Carol was 7 years old and enjoying a party with family and friends outside their home in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. Suddenly a giant craft appeared overhead. Looking down through one of the windows was a humanoid figure. Most of the group ran away in terror, but Carol and her mother watched in fascination, with a strong sense that the ETs were friendly. 9. Something vaguely human. At 2 a.m. one night in June 2001, 2 friends drove along a remote road in rural Ballard County, Kentucky. Suddenly their headlights illuminated a strange pale-skinned creature crawling in a ditch by the road. They stopped, and it stood up to reveal itself as a gray alien. They took off in fear, and the gray began to chase their car down the road. 10. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. On June 15, 2022, Jeff stepped outside his home in Albemarle, North Carolina, to smoke a cigarette and walk his dog. Suddenly a strangely shaped craft appeared in the daylight sky. He called out to his girlfriend, and both watched it move off. The next night, a short humanoid figure with large dark eyes confronted the girlfriend as she stepped outside. A tall figure in black. Hey folks, I'd like to preface by saying I am not a believer in the supernatural. However, I would like some opinions on something I've witnessed multiple times. How do you explain this? Just what exactly did I witness? It's a large figure in all black. The general shape is human, but a bit too tall, and the face is completely indistinguishable. I am not proud to admit this, but I first discovered it while breaking into an abandoned 5-story facility in the middle of nowhere to steal scrap copper. While there my first night, I heard doors slamming all night. It was 10 to 20 miles from anything. Only one access point I created myself, along with no evidence of cars anywhere. Thinking it was police, I hid most of the night. It seemed to slam in an order, starting from the first floor until reaching the top, yet there was almost no delay. It slammed way up high before reverting to what I believe was the first or second floor. I figured it was a security guard doing rounds until I ventured down and noticed a door slam near me. It completely stopped. I chalked it up to nothing but was a little creeped out when I came back, so I brought a friend. I needed the money. The first few hours were clear, but right around 3 a.m., the slamming started again. Same order. This thing liked 3 a.m. for some reason. Anyway, I placed a broken broom handle and blocked one door. It still slammed anyway. I checked everywhere for wires, hidden mechanisms, etc. My buddy was visibly spooked, and we had to leave. I was curious and wanted to stay. And understand. As I am reluctantly walking out, I hear a clear and distinguishable breath and see his hair flutter for a sec. He screams and runs for the exit. I sit there for a second confused. I can hear a faint female giggle. It does not sound malicious. Anyway, at this point I am no longer motivated by petty money. I come back with a braver friend. Once again, it starts at 3 a.m. I have no idea why, but she will not show up before this. What I never considered is that even after daylight savings, she still comes out at the same time. I thought the little prank was funny, so I said hi to her the next time, introduced myself, and when grabbing a drink, I'd leave one out for her and just casually chat. I told my story to a paranormal investigator, and he gave me something called an EVP recorder. It basically records low sounds as I ask questions. I did not hear any responses, but there was a common faint growling/shifting sound that you could hear in person. I cannot describe it, but if any experts want it, I will send you a copy as long as you respect my privacy. The EVP guy was unable to explain what it was. When I got home, I was shocked to hear a low but very clear female voice. There were no women with us. She seemed to pick and choose which questions to answer. The clearest response was, "Can you tell me your name?" What unnerved me about this situation was that her answer was clearly not her name. Different people have different answers to what they hear. Many of the people I brought swore she had a crush on me. I don't believe this part, but she only answered my questions politely, while you can hear the anger in responses to others. But as to why I called this the tall black figure, we eventually saw either her or another entity. The reason I am unsure if they are the same person is because this entity did not seem sentient. She seemed very playful and interactive. The figure in black materialized in a hallway, walked 10 to 12 paces, turned a corner, and reached towards a freezer, almost like grabbing a cup. It always vanishes at the exact moment and does not show up in any pictures. The route it follows is identical. The actions are identical with no deviation whatsoever. I once stood directly in its path, despite my girlfriend, best friend, and brother begging me not to, and it did not deviate, react, or acknowledge me in any way. This is long, so I will finish it up. The female voice eventually stopped responding. My friend, who never got responses from her, asked very rudely, "Are you aware that you're dead? Deceased? No longer living?" The answer was incredibly hostile. She never once responded to me again. I actually missed her. The door slamming continued. The robotic figure in black continued. She never came back. 2 encounters, 3 years apart, in different places but with the same activity. The figure was tall, had long hair, and appeared to be female. I'm sharing this here because I need to get this out there somewhere. I'm hoping writing about it will help me calm my nerves and think rationally about what I've seen 2 separate times now. 3 years ago I was in college in a town in the Midwest. I was residing with a woman who was my girlfriend for 3 years at that time. It was just us two in a fairly sized apartment on a somewhat busy road. We lived 1 block from campus. We had gotten into a fight over something or another. I don't even remember what it was now. It seemed like a big deal at the time, and I'd spent a good portion of time trying to talk to her about it so we could move past whatever it was. As night approached and I realized that she would probably only be open to discussion after a night of sleep to cool off, I retired to my room to go to sleep. I remember vividly being unable to sleep because all I wanted was to resolve our anger before bed. I have a tendency, with any spouse, to want to discuss issues and resolve them immediately instead of letting them linger all night. This may be flawed logic, but it's simply the way I operate. I never want to end the night with one of my relationships in trouble. Anyway, I'd been lying in bed for about 30 minutes in the dark when I heard my doorknob begin to turn. This was something I was actually half expecting. My girlfriend had a habit of sneaking into my room after a disagreement so that we could talk and move on. I think she did it to look cute and make the atmosphere a little more comfortable while we talked. In any case, what began slowly peering into my room was not my girlfriend. I could only see it from about the shoulders up, and the only things I could really make out were that it was taller than me by at least a head. My girlfriend is shorter than me by about the same difference. It had white skin, dark eyes. If there were whites, I didn't notice them, but I was a bit preoccupied, being both confused and scared at what I originally thought was an intruder in my apartment, and long dark hair. This thing slowly leaned into my room and just looked at me. I was totally frozen. I had been expecting my girlfriend, not whoever or whatever this was. The whole experience only lasted seconds before it slowly leaned back out of my room and shut the door behind it. I heard no footsteps. I heard nothing but the usual house at night sounds after that. After I managed to work up the courage, I texted my girlfriend, still somehow thinking that it must have been her. The only response I received was, "What are you talking about?" I then explained to her that she had just opened my door and left without saying anything. I was confused because I thought she was coming over so we could resolve our argument. This experience really freaked me out, and as such, I remember a lot about it. Anyway, after I sent that, she messaged me to come to her room. I was more than a bit wary, but once I got my door open and the thing wasn't still standing there, the rest of the short trip was fairly easy. After a short explanation and my brain logically coming to the conclusion that my short girlfriend was probably not the tall thing that leaned into my room, I spent the next hour or so searching every nook and cranny in the apartment for an intruder and double-checking all the locks and windows. I found nothing. With a good amount of fear in us both, the argument was forgotten, and we slept together like we usually did until class the next day. We didn't really speak of it again. She was very easy to frighten, so it wouldn't have been something she would have wanted to talk about. I'm talking about if you said the word scary and it wasn't noon or before and you were in trouble. That's the first encounter. The second will be much shorter because it isn't much different and it just happened a few hours ago. I now live in a different town, with different people. That girl and I split a while ago, shortly after graduation. I was lying in bed just resting. I had a rough work deadline. I had to really hammer myself to meet today, when I heard my doorknob start to turn. This time I was not expecting it, and my roommates never disturbed me without knocking first and having me answer the door. Needless to say, I was very surprised when my door started to slowly open. It was the same thing I saw that night 3 years ago. It gazed at me, and I reacted exactly as I had the last time. I remained motionless, my mind utterly paralyzed by confusion and fear, until it appeared to have completed its task and slowly departed, once more closing my door behind it. Just thinking about this thing literally gives me goosebumps so intense that they hurt. I have no idea what this thing is/could be, but any ideas or places where I could begin to look/research are very appreciated. I'd entertained the idea of sleep paralysis or hypnagogia, but both encounters were totally lucid, followed by more immediate real-life stuff. I saw the thing. I'm incredibly freaked out right now and just hoping maybe someone can give me some kind of lead or thoughts. Sadly, I don't think writing it out helped at all. I'm not more frightened, though, so I'm net neutral for now, I guess. I hope this is the right place for this. This thing certainly seemed humanoid, but who knows? I've never seen the bottom half of it. All I know is I truly hope it doesn't come to visit again. I'm a brave guy, but this stuff is too much for me. The tall man that watches me sleep. This began when I was 8, and almost everybody used to tell me that it was my imagination. Now I don't think it's just my vivid imagination. Every single night, without breaking my schedule, there is this tall figure in the corner of my bed that watches me sleep. I used to be terrified of him, but I realized that being scared only worsened it. I have moved a lot in my life, and every time I moved, I thought that I was finally getting away from this thing. But then the night came, and there he was again. He doesn't say or do anything, he just watches me sleep all night. Lately I've been noticing that if I feel scared or uncomfortable because of his presence, I get awful nightmares and even sleep paralysis. I don't like thinking that he is a wicked spirit, but sometimes things happen, and I think otherwise. I'm not sure what to do. I have tried everything. I have gotten a cleanse for me, for my room, and for my house. As a heavy atheist, I even called a priest to come bless me and my home. I have used salt and sage. He just won't leave. I am feeling drained by the day, and he still won't leave. At this point I don't know what to do. If anyone here has suggestions, I am open to hearing all of them. Wonder what I saw. This event happened many years ago. I lived in Maryland in something of a suburb-type community. My bedroom faced the road, and my parents faced the backyard. We lived in the middle of a cul-de-sac, so you could see a lot from my bedroom window. Late one night, I got up and headed to the bathroom. When I got back in bed, I heard knocking at my bedroom window. I was on the second floor, so I knew no one was knocking on my window. I thought it must have been my cat. I rolled over and tried to fall back asleep. There was more knocking, only this time there was a pattern to it, like shave and a haircut. So this was definitely not my cat. It was from outside. My door was on the other side of the room, so it wasn't anyone inside. I got out of bed and went over to my window to look outside. At the end of the street was a light post and a giant oak tree next to it. This little creature, which looked like a real-life version of Danny DeVito's penguin but not so dirty, was dancing under the light post. It grabbed the pole when it realized I was looking at it, spun around it, jumped to the side, and disappeared as his feet clapped together. It was super weird. I have no idea what it was. I've never seen it again after that. Not too much longer after that sighting, my mom passed away, by her own hand. So I don't know if he had something to do with it or if it's just coincidence, and I'm still trying to place blame after 26 years. I was walking my dog, and something was behind me. I don't really come to this place often if you look at my bio, but it just happened, and I'm terrified. But anyway, I was walking my dog like I normally do, and I looked back, and a featureless black face was right behind me, and there was a body attached to it, and I blinked, and it was gone instantly. I felt terrified and was more scared than I thought I should be, and I ran home. What was it? It was undoubtedly the most terrifying experience of my life. The tall lady in white wants me away from my family. Just writing to see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this. A few months ago I would wake up and see a figure in the doorway of my room. The figure had long black hair, an indistinguishable face, and a dirty white robe. I immediately assumed it was some mind trick, like seeing a belt on the floor at night and thinking it's a snake. But the encounter wasn't the only occurrence. I saw this figure every night for weeks and could stare at it for minutes at a time. On one night I even yelled at it, really freaked my wife out. After a while my fear got the better of me, and I started to sleep on the couch. I know, it sounds bad, but my wife never believed in these kinds of things, and at the time I still assumed it was my mind playing tricks on me. As you could probably predict, my wife didn't take too kindly to me sleeping on the couch. One night after leaving the bedroom to head down to my safe place on the couch, I started to think that it wasn't fair for me to not sleep with my wife and that I wouldn't let my relationship slip due to a figure I didn't even think was real. So at about midnight I decided to head upstairs to bed. As I turned the corner of my house and faced the stairs, I saw the same figure at the top. In the movies, people tend to react, but when faced with an unknown, unexplained entity in your home, you just kind of freeze, waiting for the formation of shapes to disappear or take on another form as you change your perspective. This time the figure never changed form and looked at me as I froze, then moved inches to the left and right, saying WTF out loud. It's been a week now, and I get the feeling that this thing doesn't want me to be with my family. As long as I stay away from my room, it's not a problem. I saw a very tall shadowy figure in an old fort. I had plenty of paranormal experiences from a young age, but I didn't believe in the paranormal. I passed it off as my brain playing tricks on me because I was always alone when it happened, until 5 years ago. My cousin, male, and I, also male, were walking through the abandoned part of an old army fort from the 16th century in our hometown in Croatia. We were feeling bored, and it was 2:30 a.m., so we chose to go there to save time on our journey home. There is an old tunnel that's around 30 meters long that serves as an exit from the fort. It is the only exit in the fort that had no lighting inside it, as that part was not renewed, and was pretty creepy, but we thought, screw that, and went in. After a few meters, I felt this overwhelming fear pass through me. We stopped dead in our tracks and looked at each other. He felt it too. Then came the sound that I can only describe as a deep shriek that traveled from the end of the tunnel towards us and ended up in our heads. We couldn't move because the sound hurt our ears significantly, resembling the noise of a grenade exploding in a video game. After a few seconds he looked up ahead and screamed. I could barely hear him through the buzzing, but I looked up too and saw a huge shadow, at least 3 times as tall as a human, standing at the end of a tunnel. We couldn't move or talk for what seemed like 2 minutes. We were frozen in fear. Then all of a sudden the shadow started moving, imagine gliding, towards us at the speed of swift walking. It came as close as 7 to 8 meters to us, and I honestly thought we were going to die. Then somehow my cousin unfroze and pulled me with him into a full sprint. We ran for 30 minutes without stopping until we reached our part of town, and we didn't look back the whole time. We both saw and heard the exact same thing. We slept at my place that night, covered in blankets over our heads like little cowards. Can't explain this in any way. When I was young, I saw goblins. Goblins, ghouls, or demons? Ike. But I woke up from my sleep, and I was under 8 years old. I saw a line of creatures that were between 3 and 5 feet tall and came in colors such as blue, red, and yellow. They didn't care about me, but I knew I was on my bed. They were talking among themselves in a weird language, of course. They were in a line, taking turns walking into my wall and disappearing to the other side. Every time they walked into the wall, a light would flash. Not a scary story but intriguing still. They kind of looked like the creatures from the Gremlin movies but taller. That's all. I just wanted to share my story with you. Thank you. A white glowing human-like figure. When I was in grade 4, I was walking in the playground of the school with my 2 friends. I was in the middle of my friends, my other friend Brianna was on the right, and my other friend, I forgot her name, so we'll call her R, was on the left. All of a sudden, Brianna started freaking out and pointing over the cage fence thingy and towards the woods, frantically yelling, "Look, look!" And I said, "What?" As I looked around, confused. That's when I finally saw it. There was a pure white figure of a man calmly walking left with his hands in his pockets. After a few seconds, it walked behind a skinny tree and didn't come out on the other side. It disappeared when it walked behind the tree. R was yelling, "What? What?" the whole time, and she never saw the white figure like me and Brianna did. I told my teacher and all the other students about it when we had to write about something crazy that happened recently, and so I was reading mine out, telling them about the incident, and no one seemed to believe me, not even the teacher. The teacher had a smile on her face as if she thought my story was ridiculous, and I felt confused and hurt while everyone smiled and quietly giggled. Has anyone seen anything like that figure before? What does it mean? 7-foot tall shadow silhouette in my bedroom. What do I do? Preface: I live with my wife in a home we recently purchased around 6 months ago. I have never had an experience like this before and I'm not sure what I should do, if anything. Last night at approximately 3:45 a.m. CST, I woke up suddenly, rolled over, and saw a 7 feet tall dark silhouette standing over my wife's side of the bed. I flinched and jumped out of bed, took my eyes off the being for probably half of a second, and it had disappeared. There was nothing there that could have been mistaken for what I saw, i.e., a coat rack or anything of the sort. It was dark, no lights were on, and I had just woken up from sleeping. However, my eyes were adjusted to the darkness, and whatever it was seemed far darker than anything else in the room. It appeared as a solid black shape, resembling a figure drawn with a Sharpie on dark gray paper. The silhouette was very tall and had no details on its body or face, no hair, no ears, no impressions for eyes. It looked three-dimensional, as I could make out a radius around the dome of the head and neck. It had broad shoulders, rather than many similar reports I've seen online. It looked slightly hunched over and was staring directly at me. I say this because it looked like it had a small forward tilt to its head. I saw its entire body from where I imagined its knees were. Its midsection tapered slightly inward from the broadness of the shoulders, and from the waist down it looked the same, with no gaps of shadow between where its legs would have been, as if it were wearing a cloak that draped down to its feet. All a deep, solid black color. I looked at it for about 2 seconds before I jumped up. I noticed it immediately when I rolled over but didn't understand what I was seeing until after a moment or two. I suspect my delayed reaction was due to the fact that I was asleep shortly before and had to get my bearings on what was happening. I have no idea what it was or what to do. I remained awake for about an hour afterward before I fell back asleep. I wake up for work at 6 a.m. If anyone has seen this or if you have any advice for how I should handle this, please message me. I mentioned to my wife only that I saw something strange last night and that she should tell me if she sees anything odd in the future. I don't want to scare her. Sure scared the hell out of me. Tall black thing that was very fast. For context, I will say I live on 5 acres of land. There are 2 houses on my property, one in the front where my mom and grandmother live, and another in the back where my great-grandmother lives. I live in a shed located between these 2 houses, closer to the one in the back. My yard has a good amount of trees, and it's honestly pretty scary to be out there at night. Anyways, my mom can see my little shed from the back windows of her house, and she told me to not go outside because she saw something weird. She described it as a tall, fast black silhouette that stood on 2 feet like a person, but she was convinced it was too tall and too fast to actually be human. When she messaged me this, I had heard something running around that I thought was weird because it sounded like it was on 2 feet, but I brushed it off as one of the dogs until she messaged me that. I'm not thinking too much of it at that point until I hear more fast footsteps, but this time it sounded like it ran from the side of my shed and stopped right in front of the door. My boyfriend's PC was on, so I couldn't see anything out the windows. My boyfriend had his gun ready for something to happen, but nothing did happen. I never heard any footsteps leaving my door, And when we looked outside, there was nothing there. However, at that moment, my grandmother and mom, who were watching from the window, said they saw something running by my shed. They could only see the back and one side of the shed, so they couldn't confirm if anything was in front of my door. I'm stressed. I'm scared, but nothing happened for a while thereafter, so I ended up going to sleep, and my mom stayed up to keep watch just in case, but I kept having nightmares about it, so I am now up, and the last thing that happened as of now was I heard a weird noise. I want to say it sounded similar to a cat in pain, but it also seemed like the source was trying to call out to something. I don't know how to really describe it well, but when I told my mom, she said she heard the same thing a couple of weeks back that sounded like "ow," which is what I think I also heard. So far that's all that happened, and if anything else does happen, I'll add to this. I'm hoping someone will listen to this and maybe have some idea of what it could have been. I'll also add I live in North Florida. I live far from town, surrounded by many trees, and this isn't the first time something frightening has occurred in this area. Potential witch sighting. Hey guys, just wanted to share this short story of an encounter I had in June 2018. It recently popped back up in my head after viewing some photos I had taken with my friends on the same night, and after doing some research, it kind of spooked me out. I'm not sure if this counts as paranormal or humanoid in any way, but something about it isn't right. This took place in Port Carey Park in South Wales. My friend was hosting a house party, and after everyone had left, he and I decided to go to the park, which was a short walk away. This must have been between 1 and 3 a.m. based on timestamps on photos I had taken earlier that night. This is a heavily forested park. We were walking along the road that runs through it, at which point what seemed to be an elderly lady, hunched over and hobbling, came out of the trees into the road right next to us. We couldn't see her face clearly, as she was hunched over and it was obviously fairly dark. We only had our phone lights. She walked right in front of us, only a few meters away, before turning and walking in the same direction we were too. My friend and I casually passed her without saying anything to each other. I think we were just trying to process what we were seeing and act normal, as we were a little creeped out. She said nothing to us and didn't even acknowledge us being there in any way, almost as if we weren't there. She must have been aware of our presence, given how close we were to each other and how loud my friend and I had been talking prior to seeing her. And, because I know it will be mentioned, yes, we both did have a few alcoholic drinks. That is the only reason we had the courage and stupidity to be there at that time. However, we were not severely intoxicated and were fairly sober by the time this happened. I still remember the incident very clearly. I think the alcohol was the only thing that prevented us from fully panicking in the moment. Anyway, we speed walked back home, occasionally mentioning to each other how weird it was and questioning what we saw. After doing some research recently, apparently there is a legend called the Witch of Port Carey, which sounds just like a stupid legend, but there really was a lady called Anne Jenkin, or Jenkins, from the 18th century who lived in the forest. There are old, destroyed buildings within the park, one of which was allegedly her cottage. She was even investigated for witchcraft by the Glamorgan magistrates. Whilst I'm not saying this lady we saw was her or even a witch, the story combined with what we saw just made me feel weird. Why was an elderly, hunched over lady hobbling out of the woods at extremely odd hours of the morning in pitch darkness, with zero acknowledgement that we were there? I don't know if there are any logical explanations for this. Maybe she was a sleepwalker or perhaps foraging. But none of these sit right with me. It would be interesting if any others have had similar experiences, or maybe there's a slim chance others from the area see this and also have seen her. A series of 4 encounters. 1. Was it the oily man? Location: Pahang, Malaysia, June 2008, night. I was in Pahang at that time, celebrating my sister's wedding. All my family and relatives were present to celebrate this occasion. The band played traditional songs and kampangs, though it was still a blast. During the wedding night, when the ceremony or sanding was over, there was still some singing and feasting. It was held at a grass field not far from the bridegroom's house. It was then when my mom told me to accompany one of my aunts to the toilet. I had always admired this aunt, only 25 at the time, so tall and pretty. I had noticed almost all the guys, including the bridegroom and me, feast their eyes on her. So obviously I was happy to accompany her. You know, in kampungs, the toilet is always at the back of the house, and it's real scary at night. While my aunt was doing her business, I secretly started to smoke, looking at the surroundings. It is quite far from the crowd, but I can still hear the faint sound of music. It was very peaceful here until I heard my aunt scream from the toilet. I thought she saw me smoking, and I threw the butt immediately, cursing myself. She then ran out of the toilet, her baju kurung rolled up to the waist. What I saw behind the toilet wasn't a beauty, though. It looked like a man, but his whole body was black and shiny. It seems his whole body was covered in oil. It darted away in a strange manner among the bushes and, in a split second, was out of sight. Before it ran out of view, though, I noticed its face, which I will never forget. It had red eyes, and they were staring at me just before it took off. This thing certainly wasn't human, as no human moves like that. It reminded me of a spider, but with 2 legs. My aunt ran to me, catching her breath. I myself was scared, but still I consoled her. We then went back to the crowd, and I told my mother about it. She too was shocked, but one of the ladies on the bridegroom's side, who overheard the conversation, said it was an orang minyak, the oily man. The orang minyak is a ghost story, and this was no ghost. 2. The Crowing Man. Location: Near East Driefontein Mines, South Africa, 1953, afternoon. The young witness remembered seeing an object land on the farm. The object was metallic and was shaped like 2 shells stuck together. It was about 10 meters in diameter, and it was standing on 3 metallic legs. A human-like figure came out of the object and approached the witness, apparently communicating with him, telling him that he was going to be taken for a ride in the object. The man was described as thin, with long black hair, fairly dark skin, a young face, white teeth, and dark angular eyebrows. He accompanied the witness to the house to get a basket of food, and on the way there, one of the dogs apparently attacked and bit the strange visitor. According to the witness, the man then made a strange crowing noise, resembling that of roosters. He made that noise continuously after the bite. Inside the object he saw small windows all around and little lights around the window frames. It had light brown upholstery on motor car seats. The object took off silently. Apparently the witness does not recall what happened next. He later found himself in his bed. 3. Tall Urban Alien. Location: Elizabeth, New Jersey, December 28, 2003, night. Enrique Rodriguez and a group of friends were outdoors in their hometown located just across Newark Bay from the New York City borough of Staten Island when they spotted something very strange. An alien ran to the left behind some trees and disappeared, Enrique reported. He described the entity as a tall grayish figure with long, large black-brownish eyes and long arms and fingers. It had no mouth, either, just the eyes. Rodriguez was at his friend's backyard when he saw it. The others became frightened and ran, but he just stood there looking, and the creature was looking back at him until it disappeared from sight. Enrique said the entity had gray-colored skin resembling that of a dinosaur, was very shiny, and was 6 to 8 feet tall. He called the police, who scoffed at him but did check the yards. Apparently nothing was found. 4. 2 Short Old People. Location: East Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, November 17, 1996, 7:30 a.m. At the same time that the area had suffered a blackout, the main witness was leaving the SkyTrain station when she noticed a large black square-shaped object moving low over nearby Slocan Park. Arriving at her daughter's residence, she heard a hoo-type sound outside. The 2 women investigated and saw a tennis ball-sized blue light maneuvering over the area. At one point it dropped close to the ground near the trees. The witnesses felt a warm sensation during the sighting. Later the main witness felt compelled to go to the nearby park and found some strange marks on the ground. Upon leaving the park, she saw 2 short old people wearing jeans with rolled cuffs. They had pointy ears and glassy eyes and were smiling as they stared at the witness. Apparently she then received a telepathic message related to her sighting. When she turned around to look at them, the strange pair had disappeared. A tall, thin creature. Last night while I was in my room playing video games, I saw a thin, tall, tan thing. Imagine the rank when thinking about how thin it was. This thing was hunched over, but still it was standing on its 2 legs. It freaked me out so much after it rapidly moved out of my room. I tried to forget about it, thinking it was my imagination, but I hadn't watched anything spooky in the last week to make me freak myself out. I wanted to go to sleep but for the amount of dread I was feeling. Feeling like it was still in my house somewhere and feeling like it could come out and attack me at any point had me up for a long time. Later today my mom told me that my younger sister, 3 years old, had a nightmare last night. After waking up, she told my mom there was a monster outside the house. I then explained to my mom about the thing I saw. I showed a picture I drew of the thing on my phone to my sis, asking if it was similar to what she saw. She said no, but she was still very scared of what I was showing her. After taking a sec to look at the drawing, she put my phone face down. I don't think this was the first time seeing this type of thing. Once while home alone I was hungry and got up to get food. I looked into my parents' room, thinking they were in there. But I saw a large white hand that was skin and bone placed on their door. After a sec it creepily retreated into their room. Scared, I ran to my room, waiting for my family. This was 4 years ago. I wish I knew what this thing was, but I can't explain it well. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. I really hope I'm just imagining it, but these things look so real. I had an encounter with tall grays. To start, I've always been a believer. To think humans are alone is crazy. My mother saw crafts over her grandparents' farm in Mississippi in the 70s with her father. So I grew up hearing that story, and then in roughly 2011-12 I saw my cluster, individual lights in the sky that moved much too slowly to be regular aircraft and then began turning at right angles, the usual works. So, needless to say, I had my proof and was content with that. Fast forward to 2 years ago, and I meet my fiancé. He opens up and tells me he's had multiple encounters since childhood. Completely convinced he's been taken over and over. To add, we are both autistic relevant, depending on who you ask. Of course, I believe he is telling the truth to the best of his ability. We both struggle with other paranormal occurrences, even to this day, so, why not? So one weekend we go visit his family and stay in his old room. The night was normal, nothing unusual, so we went to bed. His German Shepherd is in the room with us, asleep on the floor by the bed. The TV is on, volume on low but audible. The room is laid out like this, the door is recessed, so you walk about 4 feet into the actual room itself. A dresser and TV are on the left, a bed is in the center on the adjoining wall, and a closet is in the corner close to the foot of the bed on the right side of the room. In the middle of the night, I stir and slowly gain consciousness. He is on my right, closest to the TV and door, sound asleep. I realize there's a staticky, underwater sound in the air, and the TV is muffled. Like the whole room was holding its breath. Plus, the dog was not awake and alert, totally unlike him. Something was not right. My skin and head are both tingling, and I can't move. I open my eyes, and the room is too dim. It felt as if a dark fog covered everything. I see a figure by my feet. It is so tall and thin. But I either couldn't see its face or was unable to simply lift my eyes that high. I am unsure at this point. I pan my eyes to the right, and in the doorway just behind the dull illumination of the television are 3 more figures looming into the room, merely observing. They had to be 6 to 7 feet tall with larger heads and skinny limbs and bodies. I could not make out features, other than a shadow where the eyes would be. I was alarmed, because who the heck wouldn't be? But I knew I was not in danger. My heart was racing, but I was calm. I blinked over and over trying to clear my eyes, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but they just stood there for what felt like ages until, in a moment, they vanished. The room brightened, the TV volume resumed, and I could feel my partner breathing next to me again. I remember lying there for a while, pondering what had just happened. It took about a week to confess what I'd seen. Naturally he calls his mom to tell her, and she says she'd heard a massive bang from the attic only to find nothing disturbed. Weird, right? Months later, he is convinced he had been visited and taken one night again, but he doesn't tell me until 2 days later, after he heard banging on our roof and in our attic, just to find nothing. He is convinced they are all related, and I just have no idea. I can't find any stories similar to ours so far. What do you guys think? Any insight? White glowing figure? Back when I was 7 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night in bed facing the window. I was with my mother, who was fast asleep, but when I woke up, I felt wide awake. My mom and I were both sleeping in my sister's room, and her blinds were open, so I was able to see the night sky and the rooftops of my neighborhood. What caught my attention was a very bright, white glowing figure standing on the roof of my neighbor's. I couldn't make out any features because this figure was emitting a lot of light, but to me, it looked like it was wearing a dress. This white figure just stood there until it noticed me staring. I assumed this because when my eyes were open looking at it, it would glide down the roof, at an abnormally fast pace, to where it was out of my sight and go up the roof when my eyes were closed. As a kid, I found this amusing, so I started to close my eyes for a few seconds and then open them repeatedly just to watch the figure go up and down the roof. Looking back, I wasn't scared of this being but rather only curious until I had enough interaction and decided to walk out of my sister's room to sleep somewhere else. Has anyone else had this experience? Or an explanation of what this might be? Strange humanoids around the world, 10 eyewitness accounts. 1. Brown-skinned midgets. One afternoon in the fall of 1957, a 15-year-old anonymous boy was working in the fields south of the small town of Edstrupholm, Denmark, when a large metallic craft landed just 100 feet away. To his utter shock, 2 3-foot-tall, brown-skinned ETs wearing transparent helmets emerged. The witness was so frightened he considered throwing rocks at them. After a few minutes, They returned to the craft, which took off. The witness was so amazed, he at first told nobody but his family. Only years later did he share his encounter. 2. Lovers Lane aliens. Late one evening in the fall of 1966, a young couple drove to an isolated location outside of Rockford, Illinois, to enjoy each other's company in private. Without warning, a bright light appeared overhead. They quickly pulled a U-turn to flee the area, but before they could get away, they saw two gray figures with big black eyes and wearing strange jumpsuits staring back at them. They both felt their hair stand on end and smelled a strong metallic odor. It was an experience they would never forget. 3. The ETS in the melon field. Around dusk on September 12, 1971, Juan Rodriguez Dominguez, who worked as a guard for the giant El Lunareja melon farm in rural Osnalcollar, Spain, got the shock of his life when a massive, shining silver, torpedo-shaped craft landed a short distance away. Dozens of tiny figures wearing uniforms emerged. They seemed to show particular interest in the farm's well. When Juan confronted them, the ETs chased him, shooting paralyzing light rays at him. Afterwards the townsfolk inspected the area and found dozens of tiny footprints around the well. 4. Nuclear researcher humanoid encounter. On the night of June 29, 1973, a nuclear researcher and college professor was driving with his wife south of Chalk River, Ontario, Canada, when they noticed a star-like object pacing their car. It remained in view for an hour. Soon it came closer, revealing itself to be a spherical craft with portholes, and through them they could see humanoid figures looking down at them. It crossed the road right in front of their car and then zipped off. They reported it to authorities, who told them they must have seen a passing jet aircraft. 5. Humanoid investigates gravesite. On the evening of July 23, 1977, a family in Lindley, New York, was shocked to see multiple UFOs and then little humanoids with glowing green belts running around their backyard. One of them walked up to a gravestone and levitated it. The experience left both witnesses with a severe headache. The witnesses finally called the police, and the UFOs and humanoids quickly left. In the field they found strangely cracked stones and little holes in the ground. But the event was just the beginning of a weeks-long series of incredible encounters. Soon others in the area were also seeing UFOs and humanoids. 6. The ETS and the flying box. One summer evening in 1978, an anonymous man was walking his dog near his home in Beeston, England, when he saw something he could hardly believe. A giant box-shaped craft floating just above the rooftops. Most amazing, inside the object, he observed several 10-foot-tall skinny figures wearing strange white jumpsuits. A few of them saw the witness and began to wave at him. The man managed to get another witness just as the object moved off into the distance. 7. ETS offer cake. On the evening of December 3, 1979, teenager Lillian Carlson was taking a short walk around the park near her home in Västervik, Sweden. Abruptly paralyzed, she encountered a craft in the field adjacent to her. Two ETs emerged and began to float towards her. They were 5 feet tall, white, and glowing. They approached her, holding a piece of what looked like chocolate cake. She didn't accept the offer. The ETs the 8. Three little floating aliens. Around dusk on January 12, 1983, Ed Egan, pseudonym, and his 2 young sons, John and Daniel, were shocked to see a little bald man with large dark eyes wearing a gray jumpsuit outside their home in Pine Township, Indiana. It was peering over a fence and holding a glowing T-shaped object almost as big as itself. They ran outside to investigate. Seconds later, they noticed a second figure and then a third. They approached within feet of them before all 3 figures converged together, glowed brightly, and darted off into the sky. 9. The glowing giant. Late in the evening of March 6, 1983, Madame Fauquembergue was at home in Pas de Calais, France, when she noticed a strange, glowing figure moving around outside her home. Looking more closely, she saw it was 7 or 8 feet tall, with a glowing white head, and wearing a silver jumpsuit. Earlier that evening, a strange sound had puzzled her and her family, and the entire house glowed with light. Looking outside, they saw a craft go by. 10. The shrugging gray. It was about 2 a.m. on July 21, 1991, when 3 young girls decided to go outside and jump on the trampoline in the backyard of their home in a small town in central Missouri. They all saw a strange light zip by, and just a few moments later, a 4-foot-tall gray figure approached them. It tiptoed towards them, shrugging its shoulders and opening and closing its mouth. The girls fled into their home, but Gray then began to stare at them through the window and kept doing it for a period of hours. They finally ran to the basement and stayed there until morning. Kofu fanged humanoids. Sometime before 7 p.m., on the evening of February 23, 1975, Two grade school boys, Masato Kawano and Katsuhiro Yamahata, were roller skating near the Hinode housing estate in Kamemachi, Kofu, Yamanashi, Japan, when they noticed a pair of glittering, orange UFOs frolicking in the sky above. The enthralled boys stared in awe as the larger of the two objects broke off and flew toward Mount Otago, while the smaller one slowly descended to the ground, landing among the crops of a vineyard behind the estate. The boys later stated that the strange aerial objects emitted an odd crackling or ticking sound, similar to that of a Geiger counter. It goes without saying that the curious youngsters wasted no time in removing their skates and charging into the vineyard to get a better look at this now earthbound object. As the two second graders approached the formerly orange spacecraft, they saw that it was actually a domed, silverish disk, which stood approximately 7 feet high and was almost 15 feet in diameter. This classically shaped flying saucer was perched on 3 ball-shaped legs and had what the children described as strange characters embossed on the metallic surface of its hull. While inspecting the craft, both Kawano and Yamahata were astounded, and no doubt a bit frightened, to see a hatch open on the side of the craft and a ladder automatically extending down to the ground below. The boys watched in stunned silence as a bizarre humanoid creature disembarked from the ship. It was at that moment that the boys noticed another, smaller, though similar looking, humanoid that remained inside the control room. Kawano and Yamahata reported that the first creature was long-armed, almost 4 feet tall, and clad in a glowing or reflective silver uniform. Unlike the Kanula humanoid, which was clad head to foot in a deep-sea diver-like, green suit, the Kofu entity's skin was described as being dark brown and covered in wrinkles so dense that they obscured any noticeable features save 3 2-inch-long, metal fangs. While the silvery fangs are a new twist, the wrinkly skin might ring a bell for those who have heard of the Pascagoula elephant men. This strange alien sightseer apparently began to explore the terrain, seemingly oblivious to the enthralled duo staring at it. That was until it abruptly turned and placed one of its hands on Yamahata's shoulder, patting him twice and uttering a series of sounds that sounded to the boys like a tape recorder running backwards. At this point Yamahata collapsed to the ground, paralyzed. Although his friend believed that the paralysis was caused by fear, anyone familiar with so-called close encounters of the third kind can attest that human beings are often placed in a state of almost suspended animation by extraterrestrial visitors in, what one must assume, is an effort to prevent them from hurting themselves or anyone else. As soon as Yamahata dropped, Kawano, exhibiting a commendable bout of courage for one so young, rapidly pulled his friend up onto his shoulders and lugged him away from these vampiric alien assailants as swiftly as possible. Upon returning home, the now almost hysterical boys immediately informed their mothers about this bizarre close encounter. Their curious, yet almost certainly incredulous, mothers followed their clearly perturbed sons to the back of the Hinode housing estate, where, much to their shock, they confirmed seeing an orange light pulsating in the vineyard. This odd light show continued for 5 minutes. Before the boys could convince their mothers to investigate the strange craft at a closer range, the UFO launched with a burst of light so brilliant the eyewitnesses were compelled to avert their eyes. It should be noted that while Yamahata and Kawano were the only ones to have actually seen the aliens, their classmate, 8-year-old Ichiro Minagishi, also reported that he saw a shining object flying toward the Hinode housing estate while he was riding in a car with his parents near the Kofu bypass, approximately 1/2 hour before the boys claimed to have discovered the UFO. The following day, Kawano and Yamahata had a captivated audience of students and teachers at the Yamashiro Elementary School, as they drew pictures and retold the harrowing tale of their alien encounter. It wasn't long before the buzz enveloped the entire school, and the educational authorities, with what, at least in the 21st century, seems to be uncharacteristic open-mindedness, decided that they would inspect the area for themselves. The school officials arrived armed with whatever gear they could get hold of and immediately noticed that 2 solid concrete posts had been pushed over at the landing site. It was determined that the boys would have been unable to accomplish this task of ostensibly intergalactic vandalism on their own. This investigative team also found what they referred to as landing traces as well as a ring pattern in the soil near the broken concrete posts where the UFO landed. One school teacher even claimed to have discovered radioactivity within the circular patch. Following the event, both boys were questioned in depth by their parents, their schoolmaster, Nobuyoshi Kaneko, and noted UFO investigator Masaru Mori. Their stories remained alarmingly consistent. Unsurprisingly, the authorities of the Civil Aviation Bureau of the Transportation Ministry claimed that the UFO was nothing more than the lights of a YS-11 propeller plane, which often flew at an altitude of 1,000 meters and was visible to the naked eye. They apparently reserved comment as to whether or not this aircraft could also assume the form of small, pointy-eared, fanged humanoids. Humanoid. The following takes place in rural Oklahoma. It was after 11:30 p.m. when my brother finally got off work and began his 40-minute drive home. The moon was about half full, making it easy to spot deer and other wildlife on or near the roadway. As he was coming around a curve about halfway home, he noticed something crossing the road just ahead. He thought it was either a wild hog or a small cow, so he began to slow down. As he neared the animal, it stopped and looked towards him. His headlight beams revealed a human-like face with reflective eyes. The creature moved quickly across his path. He said its skin was gray and loose. He called me and asked if I would turn on the porch light for him. He walked quickly into the house, locking the screen door and front door quickly behind him. He proceeded to tell me about what just happened. I called him lucky and told him I haven't had a cryptid experience yet and that all I get to experience are ghosts, poltergeists, and shadow people. He said I could experience it all. He would rather not deal with any of it. Combined, we have encountered UFOs, dogmen, ghosts, poltergeists, shadow people, and humanoid creatures. I'm uncertain if this is a figment of my imagination or a real-life experience I had when I was 3 years old. In 1996, in Modesto, California, I'm not sure what street I lived on. When I was little, I was haunted by this ghost I dubbed Goldie, but because I was 3, I don't really remember anything about him, except for the stories my mom and my godmother would tell me. For example, he would chase me into the kitchen, where I would hide under the table to escape him, and the house had a smell of decay and rot, along with a random burning odor throughout the day. Anyway, that's to give context about this house I lived in when I was about 3 years old. I clearly remember walking into my kitchen to get something to drink when I noticed a tall figure behind me. This figure had the head of a vulture, the eyes of a man, and human hands, wore a long black robe, and was very tall. It held a staff in one hand, had pale and veiny skin all over, a large beak, and a bald head, and I remember seeing the feathers around where its neck began. The visual I have of this creature has never left my mind, and what makes it more confusing is that I felt neither fear nor ill will coming from it. A part of me assumed it was like an angel or something benign. If it was sinister, it clearly had no intentions towards me. I just remember that it was looking at me, and it had this calmness that made me feel super relaxed and comfortable around it. I then grabbed a juice and ran past it into the living room, and then that's when I could no longer remember anything. I still have dreams where I walk into the kitchen, but I'm older, and that creature is still there. I have always believed it to be genuine, and I believe I will continue to do so, as it is the sole memory from my childhood, specifically at age 3, that remains vivid to me. I am able to accurately describe the kitchen of that house to my mother as well, which occasionally surprises her due to my young age at the time and the fact that we only resided there for approximately 5 months. Anyway, this is just something I wanted to share. Also, one last thing, I've tried Googling to figure out if there is lore about creatures or paranormal beings that look like what I described and have found nothing, so it's kind of annoying. In my little mind back then, I thought what I saw was God, or at least a god, and I'm not very religious, so I don't mean to offend anyone by saying that last bit. The Tall Man. This took place a few years ago, and it still baffles me to this day. I live in Wiltshire, England, and the county is quite well known for its strange happenings. I and my ex-boyfriend used to drive around at night. We usually went down to Salisbury to view Stonehenge when nobody else was around and then just enjoyed the country lanes as we slowly made our way back towards home. This particular night we stopped off at Silbury Hill. It's basically this huge mound situated between Avebury Stone Circle, like Stonehenge but much bigger, and Kennet Long Barrow, old burial site. So we stopped in the small car park for Silbury Hill and lit up a cigarette and were talking about where we should go to next when my ex suddenly goes quiet and looks towards the few trees about 10 meters to the side of us. I ask him what's wrong, and he whispers to me, "There's someone watching us." I follow his gaze, and I can just make out a figure that looks about 7 to 8 feet tall looking out at us from behind a tree. We both stand there in shock, staring back at it when all of a sudden it moves behind the tree out of sight. We both still stand there scanning the whole area, but it's completely silent, no footsteps, no sign of the figure. We continue to smoke, but as we turn our heads out in front of us, the same figure seems to be gliding along up towards the hill. We quickly jump in the car and drive off, completely crapping ourselves. We have no idea what we saw, but I did stumble upon an article of an account from a police officer who was patrolling the area. He apparently saw 3 tall men in the field opposite the hill and chased them. He described feeling odd, like there was an energy and a humming sound in the distance. He never caught up to the men, but the next day there was a crop circle where he had spotted the figures. So feel free to leave your views. Thanks for listening. My wife saw a tall black figure with its hand on my shoulder when I was sleeping. A few nights ago, my wife was trying to get ready for sleep. She was in bed on her phone, and when she looked up, she saw this 9-foot tall, dark figure with sunken, hollow eye holes and a completely dark body, but not transparent. It was solid, and it had arms that kind of looked cloaked, but it wasn't like a fabric. It was like darkness itself. She said the hands were white with long fingers and hooked fingernails like dragon claws. She said that when she first saw it, she couldn't breathe or move at all, then it kind of curled over me and put its hand on my shoulder, digging its fingernails into my skin. She also mentioned that I looked distressed, but I didn't see or dream about anything. Next thing I know, she screamed, and I woke up, and I felt this buzzing energetic wave all over my body. My heart was throbbing, and I broke into an immediate sweat. I am completely shook to the core and terrified by her description, as I have seen shadow figures in my dreams before, but never anything like this, never anything when anyone was awake. Does anybody have any further information on what this entity is, what it could mean, and what I should do about it? As a side note, these last 2 months, I've been incredibly difficult with non-stop stress and medical issues throughout my family. We had 2 deaths in the family, we had to attend 2 funerals in 2 weeks in a row, and then there were intense marriage issues with my wife and me, fights, and everything like that. It has just been non-stop chaos. I don't know if this has anything to do with it. I would greatly appreciate any insight or assistance anyone could provide. My experience with the paranormal began as a minor haunting and ended as a complete nightmare. Hello. This is the first time I've shared my story on the internet. I want to point out that everything that I'm about to tell you is by no means made up or fiction. This story is my testimony for the world to hear, those of you who care about the paranormal. I'm 17 now, I've had a few years to think it and absorb it all, and now I'm starting to look for some answers. Let me tell you about my experiences first. When I was a kid, I would always feel watched. From a very young age, 6 to 7, I would refuse to sleep alone for this reason and insisted on sleeping with my brother or mom. If I was forced to sleep alone, which was the case most of the time, I would stare into my room and observe details for hours before falling asleep. My first experience came when I was around 8. I went to bed as I normally would. My mother would pretend to sleep beside me and keep me company to help me fall asleep. When she didn't do this, I would place a large body pillow next to me so I wouldn't feel watched. I woke up in the middle of the night. I would always wake up at around 02. Next to my bed was an old woman that I could see through. I could see all the details. She had wrinkles, probably around 80 years. She had curly hair, and she wore a button sweater with stripes. I screamed at the top of my lungs and ran out the door, next to her, and my dad picked me up and let me sleep in their bedroom. It would only escalate from here. Almost every night from this point on, I would see a cloud shaped like a human standing next to my door when I woke up in the middle of the night at around 02. Keep in mind, I would always wake up around this time with almost no exceptions. It would disappear after 30 to 60 seconds and kind of just dissolve and float up onto the roof. Note, I could move and speak, it was not sleep paralysis. One night, it spoke with me in a woman's voice. I was sleeping when I woke up to the voice. Hi. I thought it was my mom, so I hesitated to even open my eyes at first, but then I was greeted by the figure standing at the door once again. I tried saying a few words, but no response. If I had to guess, I saw this figure at my door every night for months, maybe years. The vibes I got every time I went face to face with it were terrible. I was absolutely horrified. It's hard to explain, but it felt like the thing in front of me was evil. If I recall correctly, it was not 100% stationary. The mass or body of the entity was moving slightly, almost as if it were hovering in place, if that makes sense. My brother reported a female voice whispering goodnight in his ear one night as well, which is scary as duck. At this stage, sometimes things would fall down in my room at night, and my parents would come search it, but they would find nothing. My brothers, one remains skeptical to this day, started reporting heavy footsteps when they brushed their teeth at night. They would go out and check, finding nothing, go back to brushing teeth, then hear footsteps, and repeat. Hearing heavy breathing right next to me at night also happened a few times, stopping when I turned on the lights. One night when I and my brother were relaxing in the living room, we spotted a figure walking back and forth right outside our window, maybe 5 meters away on the grass. It was a summer night, so it was fairly bright. It was shaped like the person I always saw, but this figure was black and not the cloudy type that I would always spot. It walked back and forth for minutes. We called our dad over, but he couldn't see it. Only I and my brother could. One particular incident made me call it quits and beg for help. I was sick and home from school. My mom was going to the bakery, so I would be home alone for a little while, which I hated. I went to my brother's room and started playing some Counter-Strike. After a few minutes, a large sculpture that my brother made at school fell down onto my face. I got scared, opened the door, and across the hallway I saw the cloud figure at my own room, exactly the same spot I saw it every night. This time it moved quickly towards the kitchen, at a pretty fast pace. I jumped out the window and waited for my mom to come home. I had never been that afraid, and I get chills from just writing this. At this point, I could not take it anymore and begged for my parents to find someone that could help me. My parents, who had not witnessed anything alarming, didn't share the same desire but agreed to it. I could not be present when he was here, I was too young, but he claimed that 3 entities lived in the house and gave us some details about where they were present. And from that point on I never experienced it again. I would not feel watched anymore, I could sleep alone and never see anything again. I don't know what the duck it was, but I'm getting curious now after some years have passed. Thanks for listening. The Slender Man in Northern Alabama. When I was a child, my mother took care of my grandparents, and we lived in the basement. At one point my cousin lived there too, and we always had a creepy feeling that something was down there watching us. The typical phenomena, cats fixating on areas they normally do not, curtains shifting without any apparent breeze, and an overall sense of discomfort. Now, for the longest time, we assumed perhaps it was my great-grandma bound to her furniture below. However, after our grandparents moved and my mom relocated upstairs, we began to doubt that the presence was benevolent. At the very least, it seemed that my Nana's ghost was not alone. She started having nightmares of 3 faceless men yelling at her, verbally abusing her, telling her what a failure she was and how damned she was. I think as a child, not knowing any better, I talked to it and bonded to it. A strange, chilling familiarity if nothing else. Well, my mom meets her current husband at this time, a good man with a sixth sense, if you believe in that, as well as my stepsister. At this time, my mom had told no one about these nightmares. On the first night my young stepsister is there, she points to the window and says that there is a faceless man outside. We move out within a week. Apparently, as my mom was getting the last stuff, multiple doors started slamming. I had thought it was just one basement door until this Christmas. We eventually moved out of state, but something was still attached to me. I'm not sure if it was the same thing because it seems the thing is bound to that house. I told a friend of my experiences and how the literal day before, something pushed real hard on my chest. Turns out she practiced Wiccan and performed a lot of removal spells. I had never felt that free before. Like it was gone. About a decade goes by, and by then Slender Man had become a household name for horror. I showed my mom. She went pale. That was him. The faceless one. Now, over 7 years since showing her that picture, I've befriended another Wiccan or two, and one of them had a pendulum that could answer yes or no. Eventually, the line of questioning led to that thing. It remembers us all. It wants us to come back. My mom and stepdad moved back to the area, and every time my mom drives past that road, she struggles to resist the urge to go down there. Present day, I have come to the region, past the street to the house, and also felt compelled to go down there but did nothing. Now for Christmas I'm here about 30 minutes from the house, but I had nightmares last night. I think they were of it. My stepdad has a dreamcatcher blessed by a native shaman to keep some ghosts off the property. But it feels like I'm close enough that it's trying to get back. It can't get through the dreamcatcher, I think, but I'm terrified after all of these years it's trying to latch back onto me. Over the years, I've had a few paranormal encounters. I think even a trickster ancestor and my mom's side grandparents are trying to guide me. But this, I don't know whether it's my fear or anger from the way the world is that is attracting it. Maybe it's all in my head, but since this morning, I can't shake the feeling it's trying to bind itself to me again. As soon as I leave this property, it seems to be waiting at the edge to make a desperate attempt to bond with me before I leave the state. And I am terrified. Mind-boggling humanoid encounters, 6 shocking cases. 1. The alien plan. Worthington White of Quantico, Virginia, was only 5 years old when a close encounter changed his life. He and his 2 older brothers were sharing a room in his grandmother's home. A bright light coming from the attic awakened Worthington, and he was amazed to see 3 small humanoids in the bedroom. 2 walked over to his brothers, who did not wake up. 1 walked up to Worthington and communicated to him telepathically. At first Worthington couldn't recall what the ET said and actually forgot the entire encounter. But upon waking up the next morning, he had a strong feeling that he would do great things in his life. Soon his memory of the encounter returned, and each time he faced a particular challenge in life, the wisdom that the alien had shared with him would surface in his mind. He eventually recalled that the ET had shared a life plan with Worthington. Listening to this knowledge allowed Worthington to be very successful in life, eventually obtaining employment that brought him to the highest levels of the United States government. 2. A gray SAT next to me. One night in June of 1963, Victor of Deptford, New Jersey, was driving to the local diner in hopes of hanging out with his friends. Instead, As he drove along a lonely stretch of highway, he had an experience that altered the course of his life. Out of the blue, his car headlights went out and his engine failed. As he coasted to a stop, he became suddenly and inexplicably overwhelmed by a powerful fear that exceeded anything he had ever felt before. Almost paralyzed with fright, he suddenly sensed that somebody was sitting next to him in the front passenger seat of his car. Turning his head, he saw a gray alien. His overwhelming fear promptly dissipated and was replaced by a sense of calm and peace. The gray stared at him and began to fill Victor's mind with so much knowledge that Victor was unable to make sense of it. The being disappeared, and Victor's fear returned. He drove off and kept his encounter a secret. Later he married and shared the encounter with his wife. But as the years passed, the knowledge given to him by the ET seeped back into his awareness, and he found that he knew many things that he did not know before. 3. The Rainbow Man. One afternoon in 1974, two young brothers had an encounter with a strange humanoid that would leave them searching for answers for the rest of their lives. They were playing in the backyard of their home in Needmore, Pennsylvania, when a hippie-looking man entered their yard and sat in a lotus position beneath a tree. Thomas, age 5, and his younger brother, Kevin, age 4, were immediately surprised to find the man communicating telepathically with them both. At the same time, they were amazed to see an undulating rainbow-colored aura surrounding the strange man. This man proceeded to show them live, full-color, moving images of the natural world and share information about each of their lives, including past, present, and future events yet to come. Over the years, this information had a huge impact on each of their lives. 4. I was so scared, I started to cry. In the summer of 1988, a young boy named Jose de Diego Vasquez decided to take a camping survival course in the Yunque rainforest of Puerto Rico. One evening at precisely 3 a.m., he was walking down a pathway on his way to begin guard duty at the camp when a group of bright lights flew overhead, stopping him in his tracks. The lights landed behind a large rock ahead of him on the path. And when a tall human-looking figure dressed in a robe stepped out from behind the rock, Jose was paralyzed in fear and began to cry. The figure approached and assured Jose that he had no reason to fear and then proceeded to share amazing knowledge with him by writing strange symbols on the ground. Afterwards, the man went back behind the rock and vanished. Jose ran as fast as he could back to camp and was baffled to learn that it was still 3 a.m. No time had passed at all. 5. The Blood of Kings. Bruce, of Toledo, Ohio, says that on the night of January 10, 2010, he had an encounter that scared him deeply but ultimately changed his life. He was lying on his couch when he heard a strange tap-tap-tap sound coming from the back sliding glass door. As he got up to investigate, a telepathic voice in his head said, "Do not be frightened at what you see." He pulled back the curtain and, despite the warning, became filled with fear when he saw a short gray alien looking back at him. The ET told him not to be afraid, and Bruce found himself opening the door and letting the alien inside. The two proceeded to have a long interactive conversation during which the ET shared much information about himself and answered all of Bruce's many questions, explaining who the ETs were, where they came from, and why they were visiting Bruce and many other people on this planet. 6. The Harvesters of Memories. Christopher of South Dakota has been having contact with gray aliens since as far back as he can remember. The visits occurred about twice a year and almost always involved a gray standing next to his bed, making strange movements with its hands, and gazing at Christopher, who always found himself paralyzed with fear, wondering if he was having some weird kind of waking nightmare. But later, seeing images of grays in the media, Christopher realized the experiences were real. His fear soon gave way to irritation at the fact that he was always paralyzed and unable to interact or communicate with the gray. Christopher suffered from Asperger's and depression and had been heavily medicated. At age 16, he took himself off the medication and immediately began to excel in multiple areas of his life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and creatively. His visits immediately increased to 4 or 5 times a year and continued through adulthood, but still involved little or no communication. Then, on February 15, 2015, Christopher got his wish. He woke up sensing a presence in his room. But this time he could move and talk. To his shock, it wasn't a short gray but instead an 8-foot-tall elder gray who proceeded to hold a long interactive conversation with Christopher, sharing volumes of information about the extraterrestrials and their agenda on this planet. Tall Ghost Man. Hello, so back when I was 10 years old, I lived in an apartment. So let me explain how it looked. When you walk in, the kitchen is on the left, and the living room is in front of you, and right before you're in the living room, there is a hallway, and in the middle of the hallway is the bathroom on the left, and across from the bathroom is the bedroom. And so I was in the hallway just looking at it. I don't know why I just was, and my grandma was in the room. My mom and grandpa were also there, so there was no one that it could have been. And a tall figure almost as tall as the roof walked from the bathroom to the room. The ghost looked like it was wearing a fedora and a coat, and it looked completely black. I don't know if it was because of the coat, but it looked more like he was floating than walking because I didn't see his feet moving. It was pretty creepy, and my grandma had said that she had felt like people had died in that apartment. I'm 15 now, and it's still a little creepy to me. Anyone else have an experience with a weird ghost/doppelganger/shape-shifting thing like me? So this happened when I was elementary school age, and I'm an adult now. I hate talking about it because it genuinely creeps me out. But I'm interested to see if anyone has experienced something similar or if there's any explanation you might have. One afternoon I was sitting on the couch with my mom watching TV. This was during the day. My dad came home from work, and because he worked in construction, he would shower before doing anything. So he comes in and says he's going to take a shower. After maybe 30 minutes, he comes out of the bedroom fully dressed and says he's going out and will be right back. My mom asks him, "Out where?" He ignores her and just leaves. At the moment I thought he was mad or something since my parents used to argue a lot. Fast forward a few minutes, and my dad walks out of the bedroom again. Both I and my mom were like, "What the F? Didn't you just leave?" He appeared very confused and responded, "No, I was showering." We both freaked out, and my mom tried to explain how he had just come out of the shower, but he seemed weird and serious, insisting that he had left only a few minutes ago. My dad claimed he was showering this whole time and we had imagined it. So WTF did we see? A ghost? A doppelganger? A shapeshifter? To this day we have no explanation. It looked and sounded just like him. For context, this wasn't a dream, we both witnessed this. It happened during the day. Also, we lived in a 3-floor apartment where there was only one entrance, and you had to go through the living room where we were to get inside. We lived on the very top floor. My mom believes it was a ghost that somehow and for some reason made itself look like my dad. However, I doubt it was a ghost because it felt too real, if that makes sense. This has been the only paranormal experience I've ever had. Not sure if the apartment was haunted since we moved right before I entered high school years later, but nothing weird like that ever happened again. Does anyone else have a similar story or a theory of what happened? The Fayetteville Encounter. Fayetteville, North Carolina, 2007, 6 p.m. My son and 3 other men were over a mile off the main road on the Cape Fear River fishing all afternoon. Just before dark my son wandered into the woods to maybe spot deer feeding in the afternoon. I decided to walk up the 2-rut muddy road with thick woods on both sides to the main road because fishing was slow. The guys had a fire right on the riverbank, and so I told them I would be back in a while. As I was walking along the road, I was hearing lots of scurrying in the woods on both sides. I had no flashlight and thought, man, there are a lot of deer around, because this area is known for lots of wildlife. As I continued walking, the sounds in the forest unnerved me, prompting me to look steadily in hopes of seeing what I thought might be a deer, and perhaps it was. The woods were really dark. The road leads to a field, which is maybe 200 yards or more wide, just short of the main road. As I came up on the hill to the edge of the field, I was shocked to see 3 large orange balls moving down towards the ground and towards myself, and they stopped just over the trees, maybe a mile away or closer, and hovered there. I knew it was not natural. I am a commercial pilot, and I know aircraft. I stood in shock thinking this cannot be real. I stayed maybe 10 to 15 minutes, then began to feel nervous, so I made my way back to the men on the river in a hurry, mud and all. I then, in a panic, took off looking for my son, who was 17 years old at the time, and as I started into the woods calling him, he came towards me, totally shaken, telling me, "Dad, you will never believe me, but I have been hiding from aliens. I am scared, they are in the woods." And I believed at that time he had seen something. He was serious. I told him, "Junior, I just saw 3 orange UFOs up at the road, and it scared me, so I came looking for you." We made it back to the river, and my excited son began to tell the other 3 men what he had seen, and they started on the both of us. What I did not know was the 3 of them saw the same thing as my son during that time. I am unsure of the sequence, but we all witnessed the same event. It was a clear, cold night, stars were bright, and about that time, one of the other men holding a fishing pole hollered, "Look up." And to all our amazement, the stars looked as if 6 to 8 of them from different parts of the sky moved very fast, seeming to converge in a group, and then all of a sudden, 3 of the objects, side by side, came over our heads and landed or went out of sight on the other side of the river, maybe 200 to 400 yards away. All 3 lights were round, bright, blinding white lights as big as maybe 100 yards in diameter, all side by side, all touching down or going out of sight in the forest just on the other side of the river. It scared all of us so bad. The 3 friends of mine, along with my son and myself, dropped our fishing poles, screaming, "Let's go home." We left our fishing poles behind and sped up the muddy road to the main road, each of us in a panic. Some of the men were fussing, "Take me home first, I need to find my wife and children." When we made it to the top of the hill, this is where the trees on both sides end and the field starts. I slammed on the brakes, and we were all in shock as we saw what appeared to be a brilliant white egg-shaped sphere with a tail covered in long spikes hovering 20 feet above the main road, 200 yards away from us. It seemed that either the sphere or its spiked part was making slow revolutions. I assure you that this is true. 4 adults, including my 17-year-old son, stood motionless in my truck, staring at the object directly before us. The lights were brilliant white. The object then appeared to rise up, started down the road in the direction that we intended to go, and then it shot off just over the trees out of sight. The 3 orange balls were no longer there. All 5 of us were terrified. We raced to Donnie's home first. He ran to the door, and when his wife came out, we all told her the story while looking at the sky. Gene, 50 years old, lived next door. We ran him home and then raced to David's home. His wife came out to meet us, and all of us witnessed strange lights over the trees behind his home. My son and I started home to see cars stopped alongside the road looking at the same lights. We made it home and were terrified. Trying to calm down, we found ourselves sitting in what we call the Red Room, which is my private study off of my bedroom on the rear of the home, staring out the window at the sky. I live on 6 acres of land, and we have a large dog kennel just in the woods behind my home and a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, which lives on my back steps. She is a guard dog. She lets us know if anything from a person to a squirrel is on our property. We were home maybe 4 hours and calmed down a lot. No TV, we didn't have one at that time. I guess it was around 1 to 2 a.m., and there was a noise that sounded like a prop jet flying treetop high right over the house. I ran outside and could see nothing. All of the hounds in the kennel were roaring within 30 to 45 minutes, and they will alert you when something is there that shouldn't be. At that time, my retriever was going crazy, hair standing up on her back, barking towards the kennel. My son was scared, but I convinced him to go with me to see what had the dog stirred up. My son and I opened the door, and the retriever took off. You see, most of the time she will not leave the patio unless I go out if she is stirred up. There was frost on the ground, we didn't even have shoes on. We followed her as she ran behind the kennels, where all the dogs were barking loudly, and her fur was standing on end while she barked at something in the bushes. Then, she took off after whatever it was, prompting my son and me to run back down the road that leads from the kennel to my backyard at the rear of the property, trying to intercept whatever she was chasing. When I got to the blueberry hedgerow, which was at the very rear of the property, she was still the dog making her way to me in a roaring like panic. At that moment, I stopped, feeling not really scared but somewhat numb as I saw a maximum of 4 tall, creature-like aliens staring at me. It looked as if it had a clear glass-like covering around it. It appeared to have a faint glow of red and black on the face. I could see nothing but what looked like it had a red set of goggles and a black or dark covering over the lower part of its face, sort of like a mask. The body appeared to sort of glow. I can probably draw it better than explain it. It then disappeared just as my son and the dog got right up on it, and my son then told me, "You see, I am not crazy." This was the same description as I told everyone. I will not go into detail, but my son and I were committed to an insane asylum by our family because they really thought we were crazy. We were released within 2 days, and then my father came to me and apologized when he said he had heard on the radio and the news that many people had been seeing strange lights and that the government reported that a Soviet satellite had fallen that same night. I am 45 years old with 4 children, a churchgoer, and a retired builder and commercial pilot. I have been ridiculed and committed to a mental health facility, along with my son, and pressured not to speak about my experience. However, I know what I saw, and 4 other men will corroborate my account. Since then, I have become obsessed with UFO files, actively searching for others who share my experience. I will take a lie detector, be hypnotized, or whatever to bring the truth to the public. My son and the other 3 men all saw the same and have their own accounts. Imps in the night. In about 7 months from now, or so, my pregnant wife and I will be getting ready for bed. Our typical night routine: take the dogs outside to use the bathroom, get ourselves ready for bed, and watch some TV. My wife had already hopped in bed, after readying herself, and I had let the dogs out but hadn't readied myself yet. But I was making my way to the bathroom, regardless, getting ready for the night to pass. Now, the way our house is set up is interesting for this next part, bear with me. Our house is 1,200 square feet and has an open floor living room/kitchen area. Our bedroom is on the south side of the house, and our front door faces the east. We have a couch that is facing towards the bedroom door. Its back faces about 5 feet of clearance between itself and the wall where our shoes go in cubbies. It's not tiny, as we can walk through there, but there is no room to hide or goof off. As I walked to the bedroom, back facing the kitchen, the hair on my neck stood up. Immediately, I started to turn. My left shoulder cleared so that I could see with my peripheral vision. And that's when I saw a little, black, scrawny bastard of the devil. No more than 3 in stature, with long ears, a pointy nose, long, gangly fingers, and a speed that was fast. It dashed behind the couch, running towards the door, quietly but quickly. For a moment, I stood, unsure of what I saw. But I soon chased after it, wanting to verify what the heck I just saw. Of course, when I checked where our front door was, and the small area where the cubby was, he was nowhere to be seen. But I did feel his presence still, mischievous, daunting, and evil, honestly. I ended up telling my wife. She has seen things before, too. So she understood. Fast forward about 4 months later, roughly. Our baby girls, yes, twins, are here, and they are out with my wife down visiting her sister. So, I have the house to myself, and I am listening to some still music on our YouTube TV app, very low volume. Only one candle was lit in the living room, accompanied by the dim glare of the TV. That night, I experienced a lot of anxiety. Being a new dad was a challenge for me. Truthfully, I came from a broken household and hid behind a curtain to hide my physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental scars. Unfortunately, and fortunately, that curtain crumbled when those girls came. Exposing every chink in my armor, I realized that I needed to learn patience and confront my own weaknesses as a man. It was as if I relived that night again so many months back, hair raising, alertness at full attention, and the imp returned. It dashed between the light and shadows into our bedroom. By this time, we had bought a recliner, and I moved it towards the front door, facing the bedroom door at an angle. Same appearance and feelings, only now have I called it out, calling upon the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Truthfully, since that day, I haven't seen it as much. Nor have I entertained it. This is partly because my relationship with God has grown significantly through His mercy. P.S. I am wanting to put this here because I believe the Lord has put it upon my heart to share it with anyone who is willing. These things aren't ghosts or ghouls of folklore, these are demonic oppressors who mimic, and have mimicked, folklore creatures for centuries. If you experience these things, you need not be afraid. But believe in Jesus Christ of Nazareth and that He shed His blood for your salvation. Call upon His authority to rid yourself of these cowards that haunt you in the night. I can also say this, look into your family history, folks. I have found generational curses to be a thing. As a quick example, my family is Scottish, I'm American, but my mother's side has Scottish relatives that came to the New World fairly recently, compared to most Americans' ancestors. Some of my members were known as Reivers, borderland clans who did many bad things to people on the border of England and Scotland. Archbishop Gavin Dunbar put a curse on the families, and any associates, that their families would be cursed. Now, whether you believe in curses or not, you really should. The matter of it is this, I prayed to God to dismiss the curse from me and my family and asked for forgiveness of my ancestors' transgressions. Shortly after this prayer, I have noticed a ton less activity, but because my prayer life changed, too. Thanks to God. I know what it's like to be terrified, unsure, and angry at these things. Like I said, I have more stories than these. So, I pray for anyone listening to this in Jesus' name that they are protected by His blood and mercy. That you be not afraid of these things, but trust and believe in Christ, your Savior. If anyone has questions or concerns, feel free to speak up. Amen and farewell, all. As a child I used to see a red-eyed thing in my closet, and I think it took something from me. For most of my childhood I was terrified of my closet. It's important to note that my closet didn't have a door. I remember so vividly the fear I'd have nearly every night, lying as perfectly still in my bed as possible. The feeling of being watched from the thing in my closet. It was tall and skinny with red eyes. It was always in my closet, nowhere else in my room. Even with night lights on, the closet was always oddly dark at night. One night when I was in 4th grade, I woke up on my back with that skinny, red-eyed darkness blur over me. I couldn't move at all. I couldn't even close my eyes. It reached inside me near my belly button area. It was accompanied by a weird sensation I can't even compare to any other experience I've had. The next thing I remember is waking up in the morning still on my back. I've never seen the thing since. Sometimes I think it did or took something from me. 4th grade is also the year I developed anxiety. Does anyone have any idea what happened that night? Why haven't I seen the thing since? My encounter with a gray. So I saw a gray alien before, and it communicated with me telepathically. It was almost like looking at smoke, and I was able to walk right through the entity. It could manipulate its form slightly to mold itself. I'm assuming I'll be able to fit in different areas. The experience happened inside my home. The being was standing beside my bed, just beneath the ceiling fan. I remember the first thought I had was if I had ever harmed it accidentally by passing through it, and I wondered how many times I've possibly walked through the creature or if it was the first time for it to stand there underneath the fan. There wasn't really a way to hold or grasp it. I cannot describe the texture of the being. It was like a vapor, but thicker. What struck me most were its huge eyes and the way they terrified me. And even though they weren't focused on me, I felt it knew that I could clearly see it standing there, looking straight ahead. It communicated with me the moment we made eye contact. Although its gaze wasn't fixed on me, I was relieved that it continued to look straight ahead. Otherwise, I believe I would have had a full-on conniption if it had approached me or turned its head in my direction. It was facing the wall and appeared to be present in that moment as some sort of guard. It wasn't alone, but it was the only one I saw. I remember that it moved forwards past me as if it could walk, but I never saw legs or limbs of any kind. It was a fearful encounter, even though its communication was meant to elicit calm in me. I don't know how to best explain the way it spoke to me. But it was as if to let me know that I wasn't in danger, that I was safe, and that it had some sort of demand or command over the situation, which was simply beyond my comprehension and just not in my control. It also chose to reveal itself to me, for reasons I cannot understand. This lasted but for a moment, maybe 30 seconds or more, before it moved past me towards the bathroom. I never saw if it traveled through the wall, but it disappeared after it moved out of my sight and left me with the message it had for me. I don't think it wanted me to be scared. I think he had a little alien family nearby. I'm not sure if it was caused by the alien or what exactly could have caused the wave of relief that washed over me after it let me know it wasn't there to hurt me. After the encounter, I look back and see the experience as the alien's way of letting me know that I was safe and that it was a protector of some sort. The display of intelligence of the creature was mind-blowing. I was paranoid that it could be captured by the government or somehow become hurt by humans because it was something that could be hunted and captured. So I've waited a long time to even share this because I didn't want it being hurt. I've moved away from that house, and all the peculiar encounters have stopped. The only 2 times in my life that I can remember experiencing something otherworldly, which I would best describe as paranormal, involved dark shadowy figures that I could only see out of the corners of my eyes. The first time it was in junior high. My friend and I were out late toilet papering our friend's house when we decided to take a shortcut back home and run through the lower field of the junior high that we were attending at the time. My friend lived real close, so we were able to cut through the field to make it back into his neighborhood. As we were running, we both saw, this was corroborated shortly after our encounter, dark shadowy figures on the field that could be best described as large animals that closely resembled buffalo. As we ran, we looked left into the concrete stadium seats that overlooked the field and saw what I would guess were about 10 of them spaced evenly apart. Then suddenly they all morphed together into the center of the seating, forming some black-looking orb. I literally could not believe my eyes, but after we got through the field, my friend asked me if I saw what he saw and went on to describe it the same way I had seen it. It was absolutely horrifying and unexplainable, but I remember only being able to see it slash them out of the corner of my eyes, or my peripherals. The next time I had a similar experience was in high school shortly after playing the Ouija board. I would lie in my bed, which faced a wall with a clock in the top left corner. Whenever I looked to the right of the clock, out of my peripherals the clock would turn to a large amorphous orb slash blob and would seem to slightly move or pulsate. I've never told anyone about this, but after spending some time in this community, I feel like it is a safe place with open-minded people that are knowledgeable in this type of unexplainable phenomenon. Has anyone had a similar experience, or any ideas on why I saw what I saw? I've also gotten the chills 3 separate times while writing this as I've had to reflect on what I saw, if that means anything. Thank you. Has anyone seen what I saw? Hello. This happened when I was about 17 years old in northern Louisiana, USA. Even though it's been a while, I'm 24 now, lately I keep thinking about it, like I literally can't sleep because I just keep wondering if it really happened, and weirdly, I also have been wondering how he's doing. For extra context, I did not do any drugs this night. I'd been to dinner and a movie with a friend, and we didn't drink either. I know I was 17, but disclaimer. Seriously. Stone cold sober. Story starts here. I met with an old friend for dinner. It was an early Saturday evening. We decided to go to a movie downtown. Downtown was usually not like busy, but on Saturdays, you expect a bit more people than there were. The movie theater is across from a public building with a bathroom that's extra nice, so we decided to go there first. It has loft apartments there, and I clocked a guy in the lobby just looking straight down at his phone. I clocked him because he's a man and we are young girls. His build was probably about 5 feet 10 and if I had to guess, and he has a super regular body, like not fat or skinny, just a super average guy. I couldn't really see his face, but I noticed him when we walked into the lobby from the bathroom, and he walked at a don't hold the door distance away from us and also went to the movies. My friend and I sat in the top middle seats for the movie. About 5 rows down was an older couple. And literally, the rest of the room was just empty seating. He then entered, still staring at his phone, making it difficult to fully see his face despite the brightness of the screen. But, of course, I wasn't trying to stare at this person. Just wanted to not get kidnapped. He seemed close to our age, 1922-ish, but you never know. So he comes and sits on our row, at the very far left end. Arguably a pretty terrible spot choice with so many options. Proceeds to stare at his phone, brightness on full, for the entire length of the movie. I admit I was a bit nosy, but I kept glancing at him during the film to see what was so important on his bright phone screen, which made the situation feel strange. The screen was bright white, and he wasn't clicking, playing, or doing anything. He was just holding his phone, which I found odd. So the movie ends, we go to leave, I'm holding the door for the older couple, and he's behind them, so I decided to stay holding the door. As he gets closer, he looks up at me, so I smile at him, and his face looks regular at first. Pretty attractive, actually. But when he smiled, his smile changed very quickly, like his whole face. Like it was such a huge smile it did not feel real at all. Like not in a creepy movie way or someone with a big mouth. But like, not human. And his eyes flashed like I don't know, but they were just different. I guess my face looked immediately shocked. I feel so bad, because then his eyes went back to normal, and he looked normal, but his facial expression was like he was embarrassed or caught, and he looked back down at his phone and continued to walk past me through the door. So I followed him as he walked around me and the door. This means I turned around about 270 degrees to watch him walk away, and by the time I finished turning, he had completely disappeared. Like I'm saying, he was very close to me walking by, and I spun while he was walking, and also we were in a fairly quiet downtown. Even if this man started running away, there was no alley to run down, and I just would have seen him running or walking. I even walked out a ways to see if he hid behind a parked car, of which there were, like, literally 2. Okay, so I snapped back to reality. Thinking that was insane. Am I crazy? Also, I need to drive my friend back to her car. So we leave, I drop her off, and then I head home. Context about my drive home: the last 7 minutes is a flat highway. Speed limit 55, trees on either side with some breaks in between. There is a larger park area before turning into my neighborhood. There are 2-ish lights to the right side that are red and white, like I'd quit they are, just airplane towers or something. They are always there, I know where, and I recognize them. Okay, so I'm at the last stretch. And just before, I was noticing, like, dang, it really is a super calm, quiet Saturday, like there are no cars passing by, and it is pretty still outside. At the 7th minute-ish zone, I see this big white ball of light up by my neighborhood, seeming like it's in the middle of the road. So I kept driving, being like, what is that? As I got closer, it seemed like it was pretty close to the road but actually like above it. But I mean like directly above the street, not in the field to the right where those poles are in the distance. Upon arriving, I made a left turn into the neighborhood. I just parked. There was this massive aircraft just silently hovering above the road. About the height of the pine trees, maybe. Not near the trees, though the trees are more in my neighborhood. I just stared at it. Mouth open, probably. I could only see the undercarriage, which resembled an isosceles triangle and appeared to have sheet metal panels. I'd have to imagine that's not what it is, but that's what it looked like. With little dots where I imagine maybe bolts? To be, I don't know tool terms. It felt as if he were truly involved in the scene. Okay, so I know it was 11-ish when I left the theater and maybe 11:55 to 12:05 p.m. when I got home. It's about a 30 minutes drive to my house, so I must have sat there for a good little bit just staring. No wind or noise. I finally decided to turn into my neighborhood. It moved to the left of my neighborhood and stayed just outside the tree line. The only way I can describe the movement would be like gliding. And to get around, my car was quick. Once at the tree line, It just moved slowly, like it was just wanting to watch me drive the rest of the way home or some particular interest. Actually, when I got home, I got out of my car and looked through the trees. I can see the white and red lights that are always there, and then this white light right where it was by the tree line before I went too deep into the neighborhood. It stayed there. I finally went inside around 12:15 and ran to my parents, exclaiming, "What type of plane can make no wind or sound that might be testing here?" We literally started Googling, etc., and couldn't figure it out. Went to bed. Felt like I was being watched all night and for several days after that. I checked the next night, and there was no light, except for the ones that are always there, and ever so often since then I've thought of him. I feel awful if I hurt him by the reaction on my face. Anyway, I would greatly appreciate any information regarding this or other similar encounters. I don't know what my goal is, but I can't sleep because I keep wondering if I'm insane and whether it really happened. It feels like I'm supposed to not remember it, or maybe it's just starting to fade. But I have doubts until I run through the story again, and I'm just like, no. I saw it. It was wild. You know. Anyway, thank you. If you listened to this far, I appreciate you, and again, any info is helpful. Thanks. Black Shadow Man? Okay, so people are going to swarm this saying I'm a schizo, but I've had other people witness this with me multiple times. There's a little area in my backyard with trees and a perfect area for skunks and other animals to hide in, but that's beside the point. My friends describe a tall, all-black shadow man with reddish eyes, and I've witnessed it too. Any tips on what I should do or anything that could be linked to it? It was in the summer of 2023, I can't remember the day or month. The location is in Maine, which may be helpful. Oh, and it was always walking into this one spot that leads into the little entrance to the mini woods? I'd quit to call it. If y'all need this info, here you go. When I saw the shadow man, I felt confusion and shock. All me and my friends were doing was chatting. Last year in December, my mom was hospitalized, and I was staying at my sister's house, in a spare room in the basement. Everything was going pretty okay for the first few nights, but on night 3, everything changed. I couldn't sleep well, and it didn't help that I kept hearing weird noises. There is a closet in the spare room, and that night, I could hear movement from it where there should not have been. It almost sounded like a person or an object was moving something heavy and dragging it around. The closet isn't massive, so that's what made it even spookier. But I just thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, even though I am a believer, and I've had so many encounters with the paranormal. I just didn't want to believe it. I was already going through a lot and was scared my mom was going to die. I didn't want another thing, you know? Anyway, sometimes the dragging noise in the closet would stop for a little bit and then continue. Other times there would be a scraping sound outside the tiny basement window. It didn't sound like an animal, it sounded almost metal, like a shovel or something was scraping at the window. It was weird, but whatever. I had fallen asleep at some point but woke up to an almost completely dark room, even though there was a nightlight on. I was so scared, but my fear intensified when I saw a very tall man standing in the corner, by the window. The man was so tall, his head was almost touching the ceiling. He had torn up clothes, like they had been through some hard times. It looked like he had dark, long hair and a long beard that matched his hair color. He had his arms crossed against his chest. And then the scariest thing happened. He turned his head and looked at me. We made eye contact for several long seconds that felt like an eternity before he vanished and the room became less dark. I looked at my phone to see that it was 4 a.m. I didn't go back to sleep. I didn't see the man again, but I could almost feel like someone was watching me. Later on, I told my sister what happened, and she was freaked out. She asked me not to tell her husband or daughter, though, because they'd be too scared to go downstairs again, which is understandable, really. I've been down in the basement several times since then, but I haven't seen the man again. I don't know who or what he was, but I hope I never experience that again. Thanks for listening to my story, if you've made it this far. Furthermore, my mom is home and is okay now. Weird pareidolia, shadow person, or spirit sighting. So I don't have much to say about this story. It's pretty short, and honestly, looking back, I'm not even sure how real it could be, but here it goes. When I was younger, about 9 to 14, my friends and I had many sleepovers. It was actually great most of the time. We were a tight trio. Usually we stayed at my friend James' house because he had a gaming PC, and we would bring our laptops over. Also, he had a projector in the basement. His dad owned a small cybersecurity business, and in the unfinished basement, there was a room filled with computers, server racks, and various equipment that had little lights constantly illuminated. There weren't many lights like those found in a real data center, but typically, there was at most a half-foot gap between them. I would often sleep on a couch down there facing this room, and I never noticed this happen before or after that night. The house seemed older than the recently built section of the neighborhood with two-story houses. This was a more aged one-story house that existed when the area was just a small town. James had mentioned more creepy encounters there that seemed made up to me, like voices calling from rooms with nobody inside during the day, but it never creeped me out, and I didn't witness anything but this story. He did tell me that people involved with the mob used to live there in the past and someone might have died there or while living there. So let's cut to the chase. I was lying there with the lights off, pitch black everywhere. My friends fell asleep after we gamed past midnight, but I was an insomniac and still am. I was just looking into the server room, and I noticed that something was definitely covering some of the array of little LED lights. It was shaped like a man wearing some kind of fedora. People here have mentioned a hatted shadow man, but this thankfully fits the mob backstory, so he just stood there, and I kept staring at it for half an hour, thinking there's not a man-sized hole in that shelf full of technology. Eventually I woke up my friends, and we quickly turned the lights on to check it out. I didn't ask them to try looking at him because I was really just done with seeing that. When I looked into the now lit server room, I quickly noticed that all of the LEDs were on, including those in front of the man. There was definitely not enough space for me to be making shapes between them. There were more than a few new lights I spotted now right where the figure was standing. James quickly tried to reassure me that it was nothing, even though he would almost brag about creepy encounters before. He probably noticed that I was actually bothered this time. Then we just went to bed after turning the lights out again, and I reluctantly lay down to sleep again. I don't remember if I saw the hatted guy again that night, but I was really just trying to not focus on it and get some rest. But I can still remember how that silhouette looked, standing perfectly still with a fedora and a trench coat, with his hands in his pockets, just staring at me. If he had glowing eyes or a different pose, I would not have noticed his figure at all in the first place. So what do you guys think? Even to myself, it really sounds like I was psyched out, but the figure was oddly consistent, and I really did feel a presence right where it was. Every 5 years I'm visited by a strange entity. Something has followed me throughout my whole life. It always appears roughly every 5 years, and every time, it's a little closer to me. My earliest memory of this thing is when I was 5 years old, but I don't believe that was our first encounter. My mother told me of once when I was 8 to 10 months old. She was holding me while sitting on the couch in our living room. She says I turned and looked past her into the hallway, pointed, and said, "Man." When my mother turned around, there was, of course, nothing. It was just the two of us in the house, but after looking around a bit, she found nothing out of place and assumed it was creepy baby babble. At 5 I have my first actual memory. It was a weekend night around 11 p.m., and I was lying in bed restless. I could hear both my parents snoring from other rooms, and the light from the living room TV shone on my open bedroom door. A slowly moving shadow of a man crossed into the light and began to walk down the hallway towards my room. I knew it couldn't be my parents or sister, both from the sounds of snoring and its shape. I was absolutely petrified as it methodically made its way down the hall. Right as whoever was casting the shadow should have crossed the threshold of my door, there was nothing. The shadow went by, but nobody followed. The following years I often had vivid nightmares, which caused me to develop various fears, and I became fairly easy to frighten. I had nightmares before this visit, but they definitely ramped up in intensity and frequency after. After my 10th birthday passed, I was lying awake in bed after my mom had left my room after telling me goodnight. I wasn't able to get to sleep due to the feeling of being watched. My eyes slowly scanned my dark room until they fell on my open closet door. The corner in which it sat was opposite from where my bed was positioned. I could feel something watching me from the darkness of the open doorway. As I focused harder on the area, I could make out a faint outline of a tall humanoid figure standing off to the side of the sliding door. My mind instantly recalled the memory of the shadow from half my lifetime ago. I sat in my bed petrified. I could only lie and stare at it, eyes wide open in fear. After what felt like an eternity passed, filled only with our paranormal staring contest, its form melted back into the darkness. I didn't sleep at all that night. Now is probably a good time to give a full description of this thing. It stands about 7 feet tall with a slight hunch. It's built like a sickly 90-year-old man, with every bone being visible under its pale, leathery skin. Always has an uncomfortably wide smile filled with short, needle-like teeth. Dark, sunken pits in place of eyes. It usually brings a smell of body odor and old leather. Its next visit came during the summer, about a month after my 15th birthday. I always kept my room freezing cold in the summer and would often pull my blanket over my head and play on my phone while winding down before I went to sleep. I had one part of the blanket lifted up in front of my face to keep air circulating. As I was lying on my side scrolling through my phone, I caught some movement through the gap in the blanket. Glancing past my phone, I squinted my eyes to see what had moved past my peephole. I saw it smile first as it stretched unnaturally wide across its face. Its black pits for eyes stared into me as I fully realized my paranormal stalker was mere inches away from my face. Dread and terror locked my body into place as my mind raced for a way out of the situation. I have no idea how long the two of us were locked in our romantic gazes, but I eventually settled on a plan of action. I threw my blanket off of my body and prepared to vault my body past it and to my door. As soon as the blanket was off of me, it was gone. The feeling of its presence still lingered in the room, but I could no longer see it. I turned the lights on and stayed awake all night, too freaked out to sleep. So you may have noticed a pattern by now. Every 5 years he shows up and is a little closer to me. I was really concerned when I realized this because any closer and it would be touching me. Around this time I also started suffering from constant migraines that would last for days or sometimes weeks at a time. As my 20th birthday came and went, I wasn't really as worried about this thing showing up as I was 5 years prior. I had moved out of my parents' place, and I didn't feel the heaviness that my childhood bedroom had. About 6 months after my birthday, my fear of it returned much stronger than before. I fell asleep that night without much trouble, but I had a pretty gnarly awakening. I woke up for seemingly no reason, and that old, familiar feeling lay heavy in the room. I knew I was being watched, and when I tried to move to grab my phone, my body didn't respond. This actually made me feel a bit better. I had been through sleep paralysis before, and I could do it again. I was afraid, but I knew it wasn't real. Then my body began shaking uncontrollably, and my vision went dark. When it returned, I was no longer in my bed. I was strapped to a stone table in a dimly lit room. I could faintly make out old carved stone walls and an iron door past my feet. I could smell iron and rot all around me. A figure loomed over me, and I immediately recognized my lifelong stalker. It finally made it to me, and I was at its mercy. It spent a long while just staring at me with hunger and malice. After some amount of time it moved in closer and began to slowly, yet gleefully, drag its claws over my body, slicing and tearing at my flesh. I could feel each motion as it effortlessly mauled me. Suddenly, my vision flashed, and I was once again in my room, shaking and seizing violently. Every muscle in my body flexed and tightened to its absolute limit. Then as quickly as I was returned to my room, I was stolen away to a new place. I was on the floor of a cave. There was light from a fire shining in from somewhere I couldn't see. It smelled damp and musty. Without missing a beat, my captor appeared over me and began his work anew. Ripping and tearing into my body once again. My vision would then flash back to me seizing in my bedroom, then to the dungeon, then to my room, then back to the cave. This cycle went on for what felt like days. There was a final flash, and I was in my room, no longer seizing, with light coming in from my window. At first I didn't even try to move. My body ached all over, my mind was mush, and my pillow and blankets were strewn about the room. I felt like I had been hit by a train. But like, a demon train. After that night I knew I'd never get rid of it. It had me now. All I could think about was what would come next. Was it satisfied now that it had gotten to me? Would it come more often now? I had no idea what it wanted, where it came from, or what its limits were. I was clueless and terrified. I've tried over the course of my life to figure out what this thing is to no avail. After that night, I began having nightmares every single night. I was pretty used to having a lot of nightmares at this point, so I wasn't too torn up about it. After all, I knew they were only dreams. But one night when I was 22, that changed. Since I noticed the 5-year pattern, I had become confident that it would only appear once after a 5th birthday. However, I was apparently wrong-ish. As I fell asleep, I was drawn into another nightmare. As I entered the dream realm, I had the most unsettling feeling of déjà vu. The place I found myself was all too familiar. I lay on a cold stone cave floor. The same cave where I was herded 2 years prior. Before I could fully process that information, I saw it. Standing at the only tunnel out was my old buddy. It lunged toward me and wrapped one of its hands around my neck. Its grip was surprisingly strong for its apparently measly muscles. It dragged me by my neck across the cave floor out into the tunnel. Once again, my body wouldn't respond to my commands. I could only watch as my limp body was taken somewhere. My airway was being crushed as it pulled me. My lungs screamed for oxygen, but even after several brutal minutes, my vision never darkened and I never blacked out. I had to consciously experience being choked without the bliss of passing out. Eventually, The tunnel led into a massive cave that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. I could see firelight dancing off of stalagmites and columns in the distance. As we went in further, I even heard screams, but I never saw anyone, human or otherwise. It felt like I was there for a few hours. I don't know how it ends. I either blocked that out unconsciously, or there just was never an end. I'm 24 now, and I honestly don't know what to do. I still have horrible, nightly nightmares and the migraines. I can feel it around me when I'm alone sometimes. I can even tell if it's in one of my nightmares with me. They feel completely different from other dreams. It's a bit difficult to explain. I guess I'm here to ask what I should do or just for an opinion on what this thing is. I've honestly hit a dead end at this point. I don't even know if I want to get rid of it, as weird as that may sound. Thanks for your time. I have been troubled for 3 years by what I can only guess is a spirit or ghost encounter, and I need answers. Alright, so here's what happened. I've got a bed right next to a window and a few neighbors, and none of them talk to each other, so past me wakes up in the middle of the night, I believe around 2 a.m., and looks out my window because it helped me relax and go back to sleep. Instead of a dark lawn, I was expecting a flicker of bluish light to reveal a silhouette of a person, but the light only stayed for a second, and I could hear running. The person, I think it's a person, but I do have a theory that goes against it, left, but a light appeared. It was seamless. I looked towards the woods the figure ran towards, and when I looked back towards the road in front of my house, there was a floating glowing circle. It was moving away, but the light bobbed up and down like it was walking. Although it had no visible body or facial features, it seemed to turn around and stop for a minute, making me feel as if it was staring at me despite lacking eyes. After turning around, it started moving towards me. I panicked and ducked between the non-window portion of the wall. I looked back out the window, and it was moving away. The ghost is leaving, good thing, right? Well, when I looked at it, it moved towards me again. I looked away before it got too close. I realized that the ghost moved closer when it saw me and moved away when I was hidden. Despite being filled with terror, the creature was compelling to me, and I wanted it to be around without it getting too close. Eventually I grew the courage to get it right next to my window. It stopped a little short, just looking at it made me dizzy. I stupidly opened the window a little to get a clearer view, and it was beautiful yet terrifying at the same time, a beautiful illuminated blue with a slight glow around it. This face-to-face didn't last long. When it appeared another was forming, so I slammed the window shut and just hid for the rest of the night. I didn't have a phone at the time or cameras, so there's no picture, unfortunately. That's the encounter with the creature. While it hasn't appeared again, the random flashes have. No, it's not lightning, it wasn't storming. The flashes that are happening have guaranteed a sleepless night. Every time they happen, I get the same nightmare of the creature. The flashes don't happen frequently, and I can't see a pattern in the time they happen, so I can't get a picture of that so far, but I'm still trying to get one when they happen. I've asked my neighbors if they see it too, and they are just as clueless as me, although I'm the only one who saw the person in light. I've got theories, but I want to know what you guys think first. The flashes have happened 3 nights in a row so far, and I've barely slept. Personal report about seeing strange humanoid figures. So, this is my first time sharing something here. Honestly, I don't know of another place where people won't judge me for this. A while ago, some friends and I formed a sort of paranormal investigation team. It started, and still is, as a pretty silly thing, but I must admit I enjoy it. It's nothing too serious, we just investigate places we've heard about from friends of friends that might have something unusual going on, sometimes a local urban legend, sometimes something someone claims to have seen out there, stuff like that. We've had experiences where we saw things like shadows out of the corner of our eyes, dark shapes, objects moving, and things like that. Additionally, about 6 months ago, I began experiencing humanoid apparitions in my house. They're usually tall figures that almost touch the ceiling, with long arms and faces I can never see clearly. I've also been hearing someone calling my name in my voice, and the sound comes from my late grandmother's room. A few days ago, one of our group members was at my house with me and also heard it, which was strange because it was the first time it happened when I wasn't alone. Honestly, I am not overly concerned about it, particularly given that I have been experiencing unusual phenomena since childhood. The Senina Encounter, UFO Humanoid. Senina is a small town near Bicene, in the province of Arezzo. Rosa Lotti, née Dainethly, a 40-year-old peasant woman and mother of 4 children, living at a farm called La Collina, which is in a lonely region between Senina and Capenol, had risen early to go down into Senina to visit the church and the cemetery. She was carrying a bunch of carnations, destined for the altar of the Madonna Pellegrina, whose procession had taken place the preceding evening. It was 6:30 a.m. Rosa Lottie rarely went into town and spent most of her time on her arduous duties on the farm. On this feast day morning, however, she had put on her new dress and started out along the footpath that leads, through fields and thickets, towards the town. She went barefoot, carrying her stockings and her best shoes so as not to get them dirty. She would put them on before she came to the first houses. She reached a point on this path, regularly taken by her, where it passed through a thicket of low bushes. She knew this path perfectly. She had even gone along it many a time at night, without ever having any sort of unpleasant encounter or noting anything unusual. Arriving in the middle of a small clearing among the shrubs and sparse trees, she suddenly beheld, near a pine tree and on the edge of the little grassy area, a strange and unwanted object that at once aroused in her both curiosity and surprise. It was a sort of giant spindle, fixed vertically in the ground. The craft and the little men. This is how Rosa Lottie subsequently described the strange machine. A sort of double cone, over 2 meters high and about a meter wide in the middle. In La Notzinca Talua, November 2, 1954. Like two bells joined together at their bases. In La Settimana in Cotton, number 24, year 15. The object was very swollen in the middle and tapered to a point at both ends. It seemed to be covered with leather. In Il Giornale del Mattino, November 2, 1954. The outside of it shone as though it were very polished, light metal. On the lower cone was an open glass door, and inside it could be seen 2 little seats, like those used by children. In the central part of the spindle, where it was widest, there was a sort of roundish glass, closely following the round shape of the mysterious machine. Rosa Lottie had heard no sound from it. In La Nazione Italiana, November 2, 1954. Rosa Lottie had stopped in her tracks, astonished and curious. But her surprise was only just beginning. From behind the spindle, she beheld 2 strange beings emerge. Almost like men, but of the size of children, was her description. The 2 little beings approached her with friendly expressions on their faces. She had plenty of time to make a thorough examination of them so that she was afterwards able to describe them in the minutest details. About 1 meter in height, they were wearing a sort of gray overall, all in one piece, including the feet. On their backs they had short cloaks of a gray material, and over the one-piece overall they wore a sort of doublet, fastened, right up to the collar, with little buttons like shining stars. Their trousers were tightly fitting, like the long underpants that our men wear in the winter. Their faces, crowned by helmets, were normal but small. Both were no taller than a 5-year-old infant, but their bodies were in proportion. It would have taken 2 of those things to make a man, she said, but they were very fine looking, even though rather old. Vigorous and lively, they were talking away as though they were Chinese. They kept saying Lu, Lai, Loi, Lao, Loi, Lai, and Lu. They gesticulated, but with no trace of menace. In fact, they were friendly and seemed to be trying to communicate and initiate a basic conversation. The older looking of the 2 was the more jovial, laughing and obviously trying to establish contact with her. They had magnificent eyes, full of intelligence. Their noses were of normal shape, their mouths just like a man's, but their upper lips were slightly curled in the center so that even when they were not laughing, their teeth were still exposed. They were teeth like ours, broad, strong teeth, but short, as though they had been filed down, and somewhat protruding, like the teeth of rabbits. Their ears were hidden under 2 leather discs, and there was also a leather band around their foreheads. Approaching Rosa Lottie, who was now terrified, they snatched out of her hands the bunch of carnations and one of her black stockings. When she remonstrated timidly, the one who seemed the older of the 2 handed some of the flowers back to her but kept 5 of them. Then, with an air of curiosity and while laughing, he examined the structure of the flowers, wrapped them in the stocking, and threw them into the spindle through the small opening. Then they stepped back a few paces from her and took 2 packages from inside the machine, white, circular objects, which they carried in the hollow of the arm, holding the arm bent with the hand on the chest. The thing seemed to be wrapped in a newspaper, but it wasn't. La Notstone Syrah, November 2, 1954. Then they turned towards the lady again, but she had seized the moment to escape. After running about 100 meters, she looked back. Everything had vanished. 7 feet tall dark figure with blood-red eyes. I used to live in a trailer that had windows that you had to be at least 7 to 7.5 feet tall to look directly into, and one night around 12 a.m. I heard something banging on the aluminum siding really hard, so I looked outside. There was a figure looking me directly in my eyes. It was so dark that even though there was no moonlight and streetlights, I could see its outlines. It literally crouched up as soon as I got up out of my bed to see what it was and then immediately took off. I just want to know what in the heck it was that I saw, It never came back after I put up crosses in my room, but afterwards is when things like family members dying, etc., started happening. Still happening to this day. Something similar to Slender Man? So I'm currently 25 years old. When I was in elementary school, I don't remember exactly what grade, my parents had bought my sisters and me one of those kits that came with crayons, colored pencils, markers, and watercolors. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. Well, my younger sister and I were sitting in the hallway facing each other, coloring. My younger sister was facing towards our bedroom, and I was facing towards our parents' bedroom, whose door was open. I looked up to tell my little sister something, and I saw a very tall, thin man standing at the door of the bedroom facing us. He had no hair, his skin was a very light cream color, and he had no facial features at all. It was just the shape of the head and chin, the jawline, and the shape of the nose, but no nostrils, no eyes or eyebrows, and no mouth or ears. Like I mentioned before, he was very tall, his head almost reached the ceiling, and he was thin with very long arms. He was dressed in a suit and tie, and he carried a black suitcase. The only reason I knew that I didn't imagine it is because I did blink several times before he was gone, and my older sister remembers me telling her about it when we were kids. Well, about 4 or 5 years ago my boyfriend and I were looking up creepy legends and stories on YouTube, and then the story about Slender Man came up, with an image of what he's supposed to look like. Although the image didn't look exactly like what I had seen as a kid, it was similar enough that I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. I really don't understand my reaction, though, because when I saw him as a kid I didn't feel fear, just confusion as to what he was and what he was doing there, but when I saw the image I immediately started panicking, and I started crying, and I felt like I was about to pass out. I don't know why, though, because the video hadn't even started, so I didn't know what this story was about, just seeing the image was what caused the reaction, which I know is really weird. I don't know exactly what it was that I saw as a kid, and I don't believe it was Slender Man because the man I saw wasn't as tall as Slender Man is described, and he didn't have claws or sharp teeth, which is what I found online. I wish I knew what it was, but I'm sharing here hoping that maybe someone knows something or has heard of this happening to someone else. I would also like to mention, as a kid, my parents never let me watch anything scary, my sisters and I couldn't even watch action movies, so I couldn't have imagined it from something on TV. Before Betty and Barney Hill, and before Antonio Villas-Boas, there was this 1951 abduction featuring an entity that would present a striking resemblance to later depictions, with the encounter itself a prelude of things yet to come. Before we delve into the story's recounting, we must address some crucial details. In the past, when this encounter was brought up in either a retelling or as a summation of the events that took place, there was the incorrect assumption and misunderstanding that this encounter was automatically false because the experiencer visits Mars. Secondly, anyone interested in the background of the two named individuals should note that the U.S. Army personnel files were affected by the 1973 National Personnel Records Center fire, which resulted in an 80% loss of personal files from 1919 to 1960, with many records destroyed and no copies made. Additionally, while this encounter itself may not be the most detailed or revealing, there are numerous points that come at later encounters with these entities that will become apparent, just to keep that in mind. Stranger than fiction. I was working for the U.S. Occupation Army in Austria on May 15, 1951. I was driving for QM Colonel Cousin. He commanded me to drive Mr. Haster to Linz from Salzburg. Mr. Haster was teaching evening courses to the United States soldiers in Linz. My job was to drive him from Salzburg to Linz 3 times a week. This particular day I came back as usual from Linz at about 11 o'clock at night and arrived at the motor pool 5 miles north of Salzburg. I started for home after leaving the car at the motor pool. I lived 2 miles north of the motor pool. I took a shortcut, and on the left-hand side was brush. It was dark, no moon. Suddenly someone came out of the bush and came close to me. I could only see the outline in the dark, but he seemed to have a helmet on. He was about my height, maybe a little shorter. He had something in his hand, and he pointed it at me. I thought it was his finger, but it made a click. After the click he waved his hand quickly, and I went to put my arm up in front of my face, but I was paralyzed. It felt like I was going to fall down, but I didn't. He put a black, square plate on my chest and strapped it around my back. I could hear a dog barking away off in the distance, but I couldn't hear him walking. He must have walked effortlessly. I could see his outline as he walked around me. Couldn't move or walk. After he strapped the plate on me, he walked in front of me, and he pointed the thing in his hand at the plate on my chest rather than my head like before. He walked away and pulled me after him. I couldn't move or walk, but he just pulled me along after him. I wasn't actually in the air, but my full weight wasn't on the ground. It seemed as if I was light. Behind the brush was a small field. In the field, hidden from the road, was a round object about 150 feet in diameter. It was dark, and I couldn't tell what it was. My first thought was that a spy had captured me for some reason. The figure that guided me rose from the ground, and I followed him to the top of the object. He did something, either stepped on something or pushed some button, and a door opened, and he pulled me after him down into the dark. I was plenty scared, and I wondered what would happen next. I got down in the dark, and I could finally feel a floor under my feet. Stars were shining above. The stars shining above confirmed that the place I was in was either glass or plastic. Then I saw the outline of what looked like a door, and he pulled me through into what I later found out was a room of glass or plastic. He kept his finger, or what I thought was his finger and later saw was some sort of pencil-shaped object, pointing at me until I was inside the room. He kept it pointed at me all the time, and then when I was in the room, he took it off me, and I sank to the floor. He went out, and I could see his outline. There was a sort of shaking sensation, and I knew the door to the room had been shut. Sensation of rising. The next sensation I had was a sensation of rising up into the air. I had never flown before in my life. In a few minutes I could see the left half of the moon shining. I was so scared, but I figured I was dreaming. Then I started to feel my hands and feet again. I sat up, and then I got up. By this time we were in the sunlight. I looked across the ship, and I could see the person that had brought me here. He was standing over by the wall, and there were some levers on it. He looked like a person, like we are. A little bit shorter than me. To me at the time, he looked like a devil. He had no hair at all, I could see through the sort of glass helmet. His head was a cylinder form. A very high forehead with big eyes. You could see lots of little eyes in the two big eyes. It seemed to me it looked like the eyes of a fly. No nose at all, just two holes. He had a very small slit for the mouth. It looked like he had skin, it was sort of white. There were two holes for the ears. His skull was very large. He had no eyebrows or any hair at all. 3 long fingers. The torso was round, kind of like a tin can. The legs were of proportionate length. His arms were a little bit shorter than our arms, I would say. His hands seemed to be 3 long fingers. I couldn't see any neck, but he was dressed in material that was like silver, but it wasn't shiny. This covered all of him except the head part, which had on the helmet. He didn't look at me at all. The main part of the ship I could see from the room appeared round, with walls like glass that you couldn't see through. The floor was made of glass or plastic. In the middle of the floor, under the glass, was a black plate, something like I had strapped on my chest. From the corners of the plate, which looked to be about 10 feet square, black beams ran to the walls of the ship. I could see under the black plate, and there seemed to be a duplicate room on the other side of the ship. I could see the same kind of levers on the wall as the thing was standing beside. As soon as we came into the sun, I could feel a real burning heat, but he pulled a lever, and a covering, like blue water, came over the roof. Then the sun was normal. But I could still see through it. Soul rising up? My first thought was that I was dreaming, and then my second thought was that I was dead and my soul was rising up. The ship was not rotating or going sideways but was gliding straight. I looked across the ship, and I could see up. I could see the sun like a ball of fire, see the person that had brought me, and see the moon like a silver ball, but the rest was darkness. Suddenly, as I looked up, the moon was right above us, and it seemed to come down at us. Suddenly we were both standing on what had been the roof. We seemed to be about a quarter of a mile above the moon. The moon's surface had craters that I could clearly see. There were lots of them. The ground seemed to be a grayish color, and I could see rocks and hills. We were in the sunny part of the moon, and then the ship glided to the right. And into the darkness. Then the driver stopped the ship. I could feel it sort of waiting. It was dark all around outside, but the sun seemed to shine into the ship. I saw the creature take one of the pencil-like objects that he had aimed at me, and then he pointed it downwards. I thought at the time that he must be from the moon and that he was signaling someone down below. No noise from the ship. There was no noise at all from the ship or from the signal. After about 5 minutes we started to move to the right. My first thought was that I'm going back to Earth. But I looked up above me, and I could see the big ball that I knew was the Earth. I could see the outlines of America and Asia, and I could see the clouds. The Earth and the moon were going away from me very fast. Then I began to think that this was from another planet. Suddenly another planet seemed to loom up in front of us, and I thought we were going to crash into it. I was sure we were going to crash, but the driver suddenly stopped the vehicle smoothly without any jerk. I realized then that we were still quite a ways from the planet, and he started to glide sideways down towards the ground. I looked out over the land, and it looked like paradise. As we went down, I looked out over the land, and on one side there were red fields. On the other side there were what looked like gray-green fields. In some places in the fields, there were what looked like big chimneys rising from the ground. It was bright daylight, and the sun was shining with no clouds in the sky, rivers running straight. We were approaching the red fields, and I could see rivers with blue water in them. The rivers ran straight, and at intervals there were bridges built across them, and I could see roads. The bridges were just like our bridges. From above, I could see no signs of life. Then we glided up to a field filled with saucers similar to the one I was in. There appeared to be hundreds of them. They were of different colors, gray, gold, and silver. But there were no black or red ones. The driver stopped the ship about a quarter of a mile above them by just pulling the lever. Then we went straight down until we were about 20 or 30 feet from the ground, and he parked the ship on a high platform. As we went down, I could see that the same kind of people were in them, like my driver. The driver stopped us on the platform, pulled a lever to slide the glass back, and then stepped outside. He put the pencil-like thing to his chest and slowly dropped to the ground like a falling leaf. He then started to walk very fast along to the third or fourth saucer. He pointed the pencil at his chest again and sort of jumped up inside the ship. He was inside the ship for about 10 minutes. I could see that the thing in the other ship was smaller than the driver of the ship I was on. Saw other Earth people. While he was inside the ship. Looked around at the other saucers, and I could see the same type of people. Suddenly, quite a ways away, I saw two ships that had people from Earth in them. One ship was sort of dirty looking, and there was one man, one woman, and two kids in it. In another saucer nearby that was golden, I saw one man and one woman. I was going to wave at them, but I felt scared. I was waiting for them to wave, but they didn't wave. After I saw them, I thought that I'd have to stay here with them now. Way off in the distance, by the river, I could see things moving. They were dark, but I couldn't tell what they were. Maybe they looked like a herd of beef, but I couldn't tell for sure. Down on the ground I could see big red flowers growing. They looked something like our sunflowers. There were some green patches between them, but there were the flowers as far as the eye could see. The Earth could be seen in patches too, and it was just the same as our Earth. I got to thinking that I must be on Mars. I remembered what I had learned in school about it being red with canals, and it seemed to me that this must be Mars, although I wasn't 100% sure because I lost the location of things when we had left the moon. Took off the same way. Then the driver of the ship came back from the other ship. He got back inside and closed the door again. Then we took off the same way we had come. We went up and up into the darkness, and then I could see a moon that looked like a tin ball. We came quite close to it, and I could see that it was smooth and silvery without any signs of craters on it. I didn't know where we were going then. I thought we might be going farther yet. After about another 10 minutes I could see what looked like half our moon, and I realized that we were approaching the sunny side of Earth. I was very glad to see that it was the Earth. But we came at it with such a terrible speed that I thought for sure we would crash. The driver stopped the ship again when it seemed we hit the atmosphere, and he glided down towards Earth. I seemed to know he was going to take me back to where he found me, but I had the impression he was going to kill me because he would want to keep it secret. We came into the darkness and then went down to the ground, and I knew we were back at the same place he picked me up. Afraid he would kill me. I was terrified that he would kill me. He opened the door. He took the pencil thing and pulled me out the door the way he brought me in. He guided me right back to the road. At that time I could walk, but I was very light, and he was just pulling me. He took the pencil from my chest and pointed it at my head. At that moment a dog started to bark at us from about a quarter of a mile up the road, and it seemed to have startled him because the pencil thing clicked and nothing happened to me. I knew from the first experience I should be paralyzed, so I just pretended I was so that he wouldn't know. He took the plate off my chest and went back to the ship. I stayed the way I was until I saw the outline of the saucer going off into the distance. Then I ran home. My wife was still up, and she saw me all excited. She asked me what happened, and I told her, nothing. I'm just sick. I couldn't tell her about the experience because she would have thought I was completely crazy. I noticed the time when I got home, and it was 12:20 a.m. The whole trip had taken about an hour. I think that when the thing pointed the pencil at my head, its intention was either to make me forget what had happened or to kill me. I couldn't determine which it was. Never told anyone before. I have never told anyone else about this for two reasons. First, no one would believe me and would probably want to lock me up as a crazy man, and second, I am sure that those people on Mars know everything that is happening here, and if I told people about it, they would have taken me away again or killed me. I'm telling this now in order to help people to know what is going on in space. My heart is bothering me now, and I feel I won't be living much longer, so I have nothing to fear from those people. From this experience I have had, I feel those people's culture and scientific knowledge are much ahead of ours. They do not require satellites to launch their spaceships and have solved many of the space challenges that we are still attempting to overcome. They seem to power. Their ships have rays, maybe light rays, but they're not with motors like ours. My experience in seeing those other Earth people on that planet show me those people have great knowledge of the people here and are much ahead of us. This creature treated me only as an animal. After that incident I couldn't stay in that country, and in October of that year I came out to Canada. I have finally felt I want to make the story public. With 2 satellites up circling the globe now, maybe a few people will believe my story. Anyway, I have told you it just as I remember it happening, and it is just as clear as yesterday.